Hello? Oh. I'll get my ruler.
You need the yardstick, not the ruler.
That's about it. All right, we're gonna get started tonight. Thanks, everyone. We've got about 7 or 8 Basin Roundtable members online. We do have a quorum. We have 20 of us all together, it looks like, so we're there. We're over 50% confirmed again from Katie. So we have a full agenda. So and we have some really good items that we've been working on for a very long time here on the roundtable. So we were looking for a robust conversation, but I'm going to remind you folks, and online, please keep yourself on mute. In the room, if you do want to interact, when you do have a comment, please raise your hand. We'll do the best we can to get around you. And the same thing online, raise your hand. We'll go around the room first and then we'll hit everybody online with that. But raise your hand. We'll have a couple of people looking to let me know on who's there. So, and then please be concise with your comments, because so that we can get the message across and keep us moving forward, because we've got a fair amount of people, good topics to discuss. So we want to try to get everybody out of here by 9 o'clock. And I think we're going to be pushing that, frankly, but we'll do the best we can. And we always seem to be, we make it there. So with that, we'll do roll call. And I guess I feel bad because I didn't introduce myself. I'm Alden Vandenbrink, chair for the roundtable, and I'll be working with you all tonight. So thanks for joining us, and everybody online as well. So, and some folks, it sounds like they're still worried. There's a flood warnings, I guess, going on in areas of the Yampa River. So I wish you all well. And I have 2 words: damn it. So it fits right into both sides of the conversation. So especially with the water group. So Katie, if you would please.
Yeah. Sonia Macy's,
Here, thank you.
Tom Gray,
Here.
Overton,
Here.
Julie Baxter,
She said she would join us at 6:30.
okay. Stephen Hinkemeyer,
Here.
Alden Vandenbrink,
Here.
Ken Brenner,
Can we pause on Ken for a minute? I've been trying to contact Ken for a while.
He was here.
He's in B. Okay, B says. Okay, good. Please continue.
Mike Camblin,
Here.
Sean Welder, Jay Sheehan, Tim Winkler,
Here.
Casey Green, Rebecca Breezemore, here. Callie Hendrickson, here. Madison Muxworthy,
Here.
Will Myers,
Present.
Kent Vertiz,
Here.
Frank Alphone,
Here.
Rich Thompson, Jeff Comstock, Doug Davis,
Present.
Doug Monger,
Here.
Jeff Myers,
Here.
Chuck Whiteman,
Here.
Chris Collins,
Here.
Jennifer Holloway,
Jennifer, let me know she won't be here.
okay. Travis Day, Bill Badaraka,
Here.
Vince Wilskek, T. Wright Dickinson, Pat O'Toole, Jonathan Bowler,
Here.
Jackie Brown.
Jackie will be late. So we've got a couple of meetings going on. I know that is kind of, people are running behind. So I think there's one for Sage House. And
The Bureau's second online meeting about the supplemental environmental statement.
so we got,
Also happened.
thank you, because I know, so we do have some folks that are kind of bouncing in and out. So if you would please continue to watch that. Vince
Yes.
is here,
Yep.
we know that. So a lot of times he just doesn't have his phone working the
Yep.
way he wants it. So,
Got it.
all right. So finishing with the roll call, we're gonna move to item 2. We do have, a new individual, that the River District, appointed, Rebecca Breezemore. And I believe her letter is included within your packet under page 1. It is an appointed position, so, welcome aboard. Good luck. And don't be afraid to jump in on the conversation. So, and there's committees that I've seen you participating in. Thank you. Your input is well appreciated. And we look forward to your interactions with our group. So, feel free to introduce yourself if you would like. Briefly.
Yeah, my name's Rebecca Breedmore. I just started with the River District at the end of February, so I'm pretty new, just getting on board still, always lots to learn. And prior to this, I was living in Gunnison doing an environmental management degree at Western. So I'm new to this area. I'm learning all sorts of things about the Yampa-White-Green Basin. So please feel free to correct me if I get things wrong and forgive me for sometimes really dumb questions. I also just want to say, I think the River District, one of our priorities, one of our strategic initiatives is to have a presence in the Yampa-White-Green. We get really bogged down sometimes with the big river issues that are happening. And so, I'm going to be the point person for the River District for this basin. We really do want to increase our participation in this basin and be representing water users. So please come to me if you have any concerns. I have business cards. I'm happy to give them out to anybody. But yeah, definitely here to listen, and to help you guys in any way that we possibly can. So thank you so much for welcoming.
Thank you. And I kind of went out of order. I noticed, so, but I do want to go around the room and have people introduce. We do have some new people here again, and then we'll go online. I know we've got about 20 people now online, so I'll start. And I'm Alden Vandenbrink. I'm the Rio Blanco County Municipal Representative, present chair.
Tim Winkler, I'm with the Rio Blanco Water Conservancy District out of Range Lake.
I'm Jeff Myers. I'm a rancher from southwestern Rock County.
I'm Steve Meyer, Moffett County Municipalities. I live in Drake. Bill Badaraka, Elk River Valley resident and at-large member.
Get me.
I'm Chuck Whiteman at large, in White River. David Rapp with the Upper Colorado River, Gator Fishers everywhere.
Mike Ferguson, and the Yampa River Project Manager.
Ted Bertries, the recreational representative on the Roundtable.
Jonathan Ballard, out of Basin member, water master for State Rio Maker, the Water Conservancy District.
Kelly Hendrickson, executive director for White River and Ducks Creek Conservation Districts, and I'm in the Senate House representative on this year too.
Doug Overton, Rio Blanco County Commissioner. Will Myers, Ag Rep. Brian Camlin, I represent Jennifer Conservancy District here.
And Melanie Kilpatrick, I'm the city of Craig, I'm just presenting it for.
Mindy Figueroa, I'm a water commissioner with the Division of Water Resources.
I'm Frank Alfone, the general manager for Mountain Water Water and Steamboat and the domestic water provider.
I'm Katie Camlin. I am the reporter for the Yampa-White-Green Basin Roundtable.
Patrick Stanko, Community Agricultural Alliance, Yampa-White-Green Basin Roundtable, a couple of ways.
Okay. I don't have a list of who's online other than Chris Collins, so I'm going to start with Chris. Chris, go ahead and introduce yourself, sir.
Hi, I'm Chris Collins. I'm an at-large from the White River and I'm a rancher.
Doug Davis.
Moffett County at large.
Aaron Mike.
Ken Brett for Yampa.
Jenna Hinklemeyer, Water Project Coordinator for Community Ag Alliance, to present for the Norwell Infrastructure Improvement Project later in the agenda.
Sonia Macy's here, Routt County Commissioner.
Claire Solers.
Jeff Rodriguez with Colorado Water Conservation Board.
Kara Shield, also with the Colorado Water Conservation Board.
Madison Muxworthy with the Yampa Valley Sustainability Council and environmental representative to the Basin Roundtable.
I'm Betty Kraft. I am Water Commissioner for District 43.
Yeah, Doug Munger, Route County rancher and at-large rep.
Robert Sakata, Brighton, Colorado, CWCB Director.
Paul Scolari, Superintendent at Dinosaur National Monument.
All right, is that everyone? All right, thanks, everyone.
CWCB.
Thank you, Ashley. Was that everyone online that had an opportunity? All right, moving forward. Item 4, apply or modify the agenda. The only item that I have is Jackie Brown has mentioned that she's going to be late. For her update, if not here by the time, to please circle back around and catch her. That's the only additional that we got, a correction that I'm aware of. Otherwise, anybody else have any additions or corrections? Otherwise, we're looking to adopt the agenda as presented.
I'll make a motion to adopt it as presented.
Second.
Steve made the motion, Tim second. To any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. There's Ken. All right, motion passed. A review of the March 8th minutes. Any additions or corrections? Otherwise, we're looking for a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the minutes for the March 2023 minutes.
I'll second that.
Frank second, Tim motion. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Motion passed. Steve, I'm going to let you kind of take this one because this was part of yours, but we got to review and approve minutes from a modified Sheriff's Reservoir grant votings. Steve, if you would like to go ahead and share this with the group.
Okay, so it's on page 3 in your packet. When we approved the Sheriff's Reservoir grant, we didn't calculate correctly how much the Basin Roundtable needed to put in against the grant versus the statewide match. So Patrick put together an online poll that he sent out to the 30 voting members. 20 of you voted. It was unanimously approved to reallocate it. I think it changed our amount up to like 22,500. I think we had allocated 14,000. So the grant never changed. It was still 65,000 total. It's just a reallocation of Basin Roundtable and state funds. So I didn't know how to get that in the minutes that we did that. So I came up with minutes from the 2 separate voting blocks that we had. So 20 of the 30 members voted. So
what we're looking at having to do is just ratify this through the roundtable. And then we'll put it to the full group for approval. So with that, I'm looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for the voting results for the Sheriff's Reservoir grant allocation adjustment.
Okay,
Second.
who gave the second? Callie did. So any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes from the voting for Sheriff's Reservoir grant allocation, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion passed. Okay, now we're at item 7, public comment. Do we have anybody in the room that would like to address the Basin Roundtable? How about anybody online? Please raise your hand.
No.
Okay. Moving forward. Budget report, Jeff? Jeff, are you there?
Yep, I'm here. Sorry, trying to get things situated here. Okay, can you all see that okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. So I will try to keep this pretty brief. Things that I just wanted to kind of remind you all about and then give you some kind of timely updates and things like that. But we do have an upcoming CWCB board meeting next week at the Northern Water Campus in Berthoud. So that I'm sure will be an eventful meeting, but just wanted to bring your attention to that first and foremost. So all of these updates may change based on that, but trying to at least give you guys something here. But so one thing I wanted to update you all on is the Drought Summit, the event you all have been hearing about the last couple roundtable cycles. Send out an email and all of that stuff. You know, we've had kind of overwhelming interest in participating in that event. So the registration for that event is full at capacity due to fire codes and things like that. But there is a wait list for that event, and we'll likely work our way through the wait list as we kind of figure out how many days people are attending and all of that stuff. I'll drop a link to the Engage page for that event in the chat when I'm done here. There's also a draft agenda up online for that event, but just wanted to let you all know. I know you're busy and in the field and stuff like that right now, so we're trying to figure out a way to either live stream it or record it or something like that for folks who want to listen in and listen to the panels and all of that stuff. Not sure what that looks like yet, but at the very least, we will have a recording available. I know that's not ideal for folks who want to listen in real time or participate virtually due to schedules, but that's what we're working with right now, and certainly keep you all updated if anything changes that I know of, but that's the plan right now. Other things I wanted to touch on, just a few kind of funding deadlines for you all to keep in mind. The June 1st WSRF deadline is the last one that's going to count towards this year's WSRF cap. As I am tracking it for you all right now, you're kind of well on your way. Looks like to date, the roundtable's approved just north of 640,000 in WSRF funds, just in basin funds. So, you know, that puts you well below where you needed to be to get your full annual refresh in fiscal year 24. But based on the conversation you all just had, that number might be a little bit low even. I'll refer to Steve on that during his update. But other thing, the June 1st CWCB deadline is also the deadline for any PEPO grants coming in this year. So that would be the Basin Coordinator grants, as well as any statewide initiative grants that folks are working on. There is a second PEPO deadline in December, but that June 1st deadline is coming up pretty quick. The other one I wanted to mention, and Ashley's online here, so you can ask her if you have any questions, but the July 1st water plan grant deadline is approaching pretty quickly, and Ashley and the other water plan grant managers just asked me to let you all know if you have a project idea or are potentially working on a grant request for a water plan grant for that July 1 deadline, to reach out to the water plan grant managers. Early is better. You know, 4 to 6 weeks before the deadline's kind of the sweet spot, but they won't be able to help as much during the last week of June leading up to that deadline, just trying to corral everything and all of that. Also, just wanted to give you all a couple updates on the legislative session. If you have any questions about any of these bills or anything like that, please refer them to Lauren Rist or Daphne Gervais at DNR. But the Senate Bill 270, the stream restoration bill, did pass. It was heavily amended, but it did pass. So wanted to let you all know about that. Also, the more exciting things for us are the governor's budget also passed, which includes 4 FTE for CWCB, kind of spread across the Colorado River team, but also some other important staff updates for CWCB to help with capacity and things like that. The other thing that the governor's budget did was create a Colorado River commissioner position. We have no details on how that's going to unfold or what that's going to look like, for the Colorado River commissioner position. Kind of assuming that Becky's going to move into that role, and we'll be looking for a new CWCB director. But more details to come on that as they kind of flesh that out here at the beginning of the fiscal year in July. Also, the CWCB's projects bill also passed, which is pretty exciting. There's $1 million for the chasm program included in that, along with numerous other projects that were included in that. So that's really exciting. Also, a $12.5 million transfer to the water plant grant program included in the projects bill. So that'll make the water plant grant budget, about $25 million for fiscal year 24, which is really exciting and a testament to all the great work being done around the state and in the Yampa-White-Green Basin. Also, the Colorado River Drought Task Force bill also passed. A complete shift from what was floating around earlier, but did pass. Don't have a ton of details on what that's going to look like either, but like I said, any questions on any of those bills can go directly to Lauren Rist or Daphne Gervais at DNR. A couple other things real quick, just some reminders. For those of you that are required to do 1051 reporting, it's that time of year again. The deadline for that is June 30th. So just wanted to bring your attention to that. I'll drop a couple links in the chat for that as well. Links to the portal, new registration, those types of things, so that you have them when it comes time for you all to do that. Also, reminder, C9 Summit is November 14th. Still working on ironing out all the details on that and a location. We're getting a lot closer to zeroing in on a location, but with it being in conjunction with the November board meeting, it's likely going to be in the Denver area. Couple other things here. Some rolling grant deadlines. The Wildfire Ready Watersheds program is accepting applications on a rolling basis. Also, the federal technical assistance funds, which are tied to the ARPA funds that we got from the federal government, also accepting applications on a rolling basis. One thing to note about both of those programs, since they're tied to the ARPA funds, those funds need to be awarded by December 31st, 2024, and spent by December 31st, 2026. Michael Reagan's the contact for the technical assistance program, Chris Stern for the Wildfire Ready Watersheds program. So reach out to them if you have interest or are working on an application for that. As Alvin mentioned at the beginning, flood bulletin is live, taking observations and things like that. I will drop a link for the chat in the chat for that as well. New website, so just wanted to bring your attention to that as well. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, we're still collecting information for Commissioner Mitchell via engagecwcb.org, the draft SEIS for modified Powell deed operations. Comments are due by the end of May 30th. So that'll be a link that I drop as well. But just wanted to bring your attention to that. If you have comments for Director Mitchell, or just some ideas and things like that, we set up a portal to accept, some information and gather information for the Colorado River team that way. I know it can sometimes feel like Engage CWCB is maybe just a place where you dump things and they never get reviewed, but I can assure you they are reviewing all of those and will likely reach out if they have any questions. But I think that's all I had. I, of course, taking questions.
Thanks, Jeff. Anybody in the room have anything for Jeff?
Hey, Jeff, this is Steve. I have a question on so you said we've got 650,000+ in our account?
No, just north of 641,662 that you've approved to date. So that's up until the April 1st deadline. I think I got everything from the April 1st deadline. So that leaves you with 358,000. It's changed, something like that, by my calculations. But as you know, we always talk about this, Steve. I trust your accounting a lot more than mine. You have your finger on the pulse a little bit more than I do, but that's what I'm showing, and I can certainly dig into that if that's completely wrong. It sounds like maybe you might have added some funds since I last checked, so that could be a little bit low.
Well, yeah, I guess I was under the impression that whatever grants had been approved by CWCB, which I assume we've still got 2 grants coming at you this May, next week. And so it's really the account. Once that meeting's done, you guys don't have another meeting, so that would be our account balance that gets calculated as being the July 1st balance. Has that changed? You mentioned that April date. I wasn't sure what that is.
Yeah, so the June 1st deadline, the one coming up here in a few weeks, that's the last one we're going to count towards the fiscal year cap. So any any accounting that we do to see if the basin is going to get their full annual allocation. So that $300,000 that typically comes after the September board meeting. We wanted to give every roundtable the greatest opportunity possible to spend as much funds as they could. And so that's one of the things we clarified in the revision of the criteria and guidelines in September is that June 1st deadline will be the last one that'll count towards the cap. So anything you submit to the portal in June will count. Obviously it wouldn't get approved by the board until September, but we will count it towards your cap when we're trying to figure out what kind of annual allocation the basins are going to get, if that makes sense.
Okay, that's different than what I was operating on. So I'll get with you off meeting.
Yeah, we can talk about it. I know you do a really great job of working with the CWCB fiscal year. Some other basins, and myself included, that fiscal year July timeframe is sometimes a little bit confusing. So we just tried to clarify, because the annual allocation doesn't actually get approved by the board until after the September Finance Committee. Just trying to make it a little bit more clear so that you all, instead of planning for your annual allocation in July, you'll actually get it in September and know about it then. So trying to make it just kind of an October to October type of schedule, rather than you get it in October, we figure it out in July, and then you get it in October again. Just trying to clarify and give every roundtable because everybody meets on different schedules, the greatest opportunity to spend down those funds as possible.
Anybody in the room have anything else? Online?
So yeah, this is Doug Alden. So I guess I have a question for Jeff. So the governor's budget was approved, which included a new CWCB director. When does that become effective? I know that Director Brown is not with us for a little bit here, and Director Sakata is, but if you have an answer, I'm just curious to that. And I'm also curious whether the CWCB Board of Directors are going to be actively involved in that new hire as well. So if somebody wanted to answer that, or maybe you can't and won't. And again, is that effective on the fiscal year at June 30th? And anyhow, a couple of questions there. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. Appreciate the question. Not exactly sure yet. We don't have a ton of details on how that's going to play out. We fully expect Director Mitchell to continue her role as the Upper Colorado River Commissioner for the state. And so what the governor's budget did was essentially separate that and create a position for the Upper Colorado River Commissioner. And, typically the director of the CWCB kind of fills both of those roles. And, with the upcoming negotiations in 2026 and other things, just, the amount of time it takes to serve in that role as Upper Colorado River Commissioner, it just makes a little bit more sense to have those be two separate positions. So the director of the CWCB, can run the agency, and the Upper Colorado River Commissioner can focus on that, because, you all know a lot better than I do what that's going to take to, represent the state in those negotiations and things like that. So I'm the position, while it's been approved, won't actually be available until at least the fiscal year, but no idea how long it's going to take to transition, what the hiring process for a new CWCB director, or, if things go a way that we are not anticipating, a Upper Colorado River Commissioner position, but don't really know what that looks like, but certainly keep you all posted on that.
Thank you much.
Anyone else online?
Yeah, this is Ken Brenner. Jeff, thank you for your report. And I was just wondering, have I missed a summary from the Colorado Water Conservation Board that just talks about all of the pieces of legislation that came through this year that affect water? And if not, are you planning to prepare something like that we can then turn and share with our local media and with our various organizations that we represent?
That's a great question, Ken. I don't know the answer to that. I'm assuming that there is likely some sort of summary coming. The legislative session just wrapped up on Monday, so we're still kind of trying to pick up the pieces, but I would refer you to Daphne Gervais at DNR. She's the legislative liaison for DNR. She'll probably have a better idea of what that looks like, if it's coming, those types of things. These bills I just wanted to bring to your attention, are the ones that are kind of most applicable to the roundtables. There's some other water bills that were introduced and in varying stages of passing and things like that. So, I can certainly follow up on that, but yeah, I refer you to Daphne Gervais on that.
Jeff, I could jump in too, if it's helpful.
Yeah. Didn't see you there, Russ. Go ahead.
Russ, I didn't see you. I would have posed that of you.
All good. No, it's fine. Jeff does a great job. I just came in late, so apologies. I just running from one meeting to another. But yeah, it's a good question, Ken. I think traditionally we haven't really produced a summary document that we send around, but we certainly, as we get information out, give those updates. So IBCC, I think, will have another legislative update of just where things are at. And that's something certainly you could report back. And then generally, if there's kind of big shifts, like that's stuff that we'll put in the newsletter. So to Doug's question, which was also a good one, is we know more, and as you know, as a position gets posted, that's I'm sure news that we'll be getting out in all the formats we typically do.
Thank you, Russ.
Yeah, I think we're gonna, oh, yes, ma'am.
I was just gonna say, Ken, I don't know if you subscribe to the Water Education Colorado, their fresh water newsletter. They did send out summaries of the 7, of the ones that he put up there, an additional 3 that have to do with water, what the bills were, their number, and just a summary about them. I can forward that to you if you want me to.
Thank you. I do receive that, and I for some reason I have not noticed that yet, but I'll review that. Thank you.
Earlier today it came out.
All right, thanks, Jeff. We're gonna keep moving forward. Thanks, everyone. Aaron, are you with us this evening? I thought I heard your name.
I
Thank you.
am. I'm sorry I missed the introduction. For those who don't know me, I'm Aaron Light with the Colorado Division of Water Resources. I'm the division engineer here for Water Division 6. You know, you guys are on tight schedule, so I'm only going to mention one thing. Jeff was already talking about, or excuse me, it was Russ or one of the CWCB folks was talking about new positions. DWR also received some new positions with the signing of the long bill on May 1. DWR received 8.5 positions. We were awarded 8.5 positions. 1 position is going to be in Denver, and 7.5 positions are located on the western slope. For Division 6 specifically, we received 1.5 FTE positions. We're hoping that we can bring enough funds together and actually make those 2 positions here in Division 6. So I'm really excited. That is huge for us. For those who don't know the process, we are a fully general funded agency. And so we don't just add staff. We have to go through the legislative process and get that approved, just like CWCB did and all of our DWR staff. So it's a lot of work. It doesn't happen often, and it's really exciting when it does. So, you know, again, I'm excited. One full-time FTE that was awarded is a Yampa River Ops position, and the half-time is a half-time hydro. So those are the positions we were awarded here in Division 6. Alden, with that, I'm going to leave it at that. I know you have a full schedule. If somebody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but otherwise, I'm just going to call it that.
Anybody in the room have anything? Online? Aaron, well, since there's none, Aaron, the only thing I see is with all the water coming down, I hope you and your commissioners have a much easier year without having to chase all the administration. So let's hope you guys
I think we're all feeling a little relieved right now.
So, all right, moving forward. Thank you, Aaron. Steve, I know you've got 5 items on your agenda.
I do.
And I'm just gonna kind of hand the keys over to you, so.
Probably not going to do River first.
No.
Yeah, I thought Jim.
No, I sure, thank you for calling me. I read right over top of it. Thank you for pointing that out, Jeff. Item 11, item 10, I can't count nor read there. So glasses are made for.
Always last. Always.
So, yes, Jeff, and Ken, I'm gonna turn it over to you for your Big River and IBCC update, so.
Okay, I am going to launch this PowerPoint, I think, if I can. Maybe. Patrick Hilton.
What do you need? You need, go to slideshow.
There we go. Okay. Good enough. So, whoops. Thanks. We're going to try to get this done in 20 minutes with my usual disclaimer that being brief is not necessarily my best thing. What we hope to do today is just real quickly go through the position paper on the Colorado River crisis, and I'm going to ask for a motion to approve that. We'll quickly go over the revisions from the latest draft. We're gonna spend about 10 minutes on the supplemental environmental impact statement, the draft that Jeff Rodriguez made reference to. There's some really important things there. And so hopefully we can get through that in 10 minutes. You're not going to get a lot of detail. And if you have questions, we can take that up later. And then lastly, Jeff made also a point about the task force bill passing, and both Tom and Callie may be able to help fill us in a little bit and characterize exactly what that thing is and where it sits in the process today. All right, Ken will talk a little bit about the next IBCC meeting, which is scheduled for the 8th of June. With that, hopefully all of you had a chance to go to the Google Drive, read the Colorado River Crisis Position Paper Draft 3.1 and memorize it. And Steve said he did. But in case you didn't, here's a quick overview of the changes that we made since version 2.1, which was there. In the preamble, one of the most important things that happened, we were trying to maybe de-emphasize that constant reference to our obligation to the lower basin to send them 7.5 million acre feet a year on a 10-year average. And that I think makes sense. If the river hydrology doesn't support 7.5, then they may not get 7.5. So while we want to say that the compact is on our side, we also don't want to continually reinforce that idea that no matter what, the lower basin's getting 7.5 million acre feet. Put in a reminder about our upper Colorado River compact, which requires that we in the Yampa on a 10-year rolling average basis send 5 million acre feet past those greedy guys at Maybell.
Isn't that 0.5?
5 million acre feet per year on a 10-year rolling average basis. In the short-term drought provisions, we added some anti-speculation language to 0.3. That's about the SCP, which, by the way, I don't know if any of you saw that article in the Denver Post. A little bit difficult to read because you have to have a subscription and it's complicated. But the SCP evidently has not been a roaring success. Undersubscribed, not a lot going on with that. And my favorite quote was one of the tribal leaders from Arizona, I think it might have been the Gila tribe, said, "They ain't fixed nothing." So the SCP, to my gratification, that doesn't seem like it's having a huge impact. In 0.7, you remember we were talking about streamlining projects, making it easier to bring projects online. We just aligned our language with the BIP about making infrastructure improvements and storage, that kind of thing. And in 0.9, we added protection for pre-compact rights. In the post-2026 provisions, we added a sixth statement, which said essentially, listen, we need to improve the river system and we need to improve the operation of the reservoirs. Let's do that through operational improvements and conservation, and not by moving water from the upper basin to the lower basin. So that's a high level view of version 3.1. I know last time I might have seemed a little frustrated that we had to go through this again. I want to clarify that I was just frustrated with myself for mismanaging the communications and the way this thing went. This revision is an improvement over version 2, and all of the people that commented and added really helped. So it's a great, it was a good step, and I'm glad we did it. And I want to call out Claire Solars as well. She did her usual masterful job of editing at the end. So thanks to everybody who contributed. And with that, unless you have questions, are there any questions about draft 3.1? Questions in the room? Questions online?
Hey, Jeff, thank you so much for all the work and effort that you've put into this. I'd like to move approval of the position paper 3.1 by the Yampa-White-Green Basin Roundtable.
I'll second. This is Sonia Macy's.
Thank you, Sonia.
I think we had one question, so before we vote, Oh, well, I just wanted to chime in real quick here, an update on SCPP if that you all might be interested. I didn't hear.
We couldn't quite hear you.
Oh, I just wanted to chime in and provide a brief.
Yeah,
update.
go ahead.
So, I'm Greg Peterson, Colorado Ag Water Alliance. We actually have 9 projects, crop switching projects. They're all, mostly all in the Southwest in SCPP this year. And it's been a very difficult contracting process. The Bureau of Reclamation got involved and wanted to do an economic analysis of every project. And for some reason, they come to conclusions that grass hay is more valuable than alfalfa. We have a whole long, and we had to argue with them on quite a few things. And they just sent out contracts last week, finally, and they put a price cap on projects between $400 and $500 per acre foot. And so there are a number of people who planned on doing SCPP, and now their only option is to take a price cut and participate. And so there's quite a few people who've been pretty frustrated with the process and just having Bureau handle it.
Interesting, interesting. Thanks for that commentary.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I've heard the same thing, so.
Yeah, very cool. Good, thank you. All right. Motion on the floor?
Yeah, we do. We got a motion and a second on the floor. Is there other discussion? Otherwise, we're ready to move this thing forward. To vote.
Yeah, it's Sonia here. I just wanted to thank you guys so much for kind of slowing down the process and engaging everybody in that second meeting. I found it really, really valuable. I think the input that was added was really additive and important. And I think we have a really good product here. So I really appreciate the time that you took to reanalyze it, engage everybody in the process, and move forward. So thank you.
Thanks for the feedback. All in favor of approving 3.1 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Alden, can I ask you a question? Jeff, I know you and I think Ken went out and talked about this paper and what we're doing to other roundtables. What, if anything, is going to transpire as a result of that?
That's a good question, Frank. So we've had Zoom meetings and in-person meetings with 3 different roundtables around this topic. A lot of positive feedback about that, and we're still sort of sifting that, but I think there's some impetus for an all West Slope sort of summit to talk about and maybe bring out an all West Slope sort of paper that addresses some of those same facets. The drought summit that Jeff Rodriguez is talking about that's coming up, there's also sort of some movement towards a similar document, kind of an all Colorado approach that might take out some of the more West Slope centric ideas. But I think in general, my view of it is that it started a lot of conversations, and a couple of the roundtables that we talked about have had specific sessions just addressing their own view. What do they think of the crisis? And our ideas were just kind of a starting point for them. And I think it was very positive.
Good, thank you.
And not everyone agreed with our position.
Imagine that.
But,
Yeah,
but that was
absolutely.
okay. But everything that when I participated in and listened in, it was all very constructive. I've had other roundtables come visit with me saying, well, we're going to start our own kind of big river committee now. We want to get a committee like that, or we want to develop a paper like that. That's what I heard. And then
We'll hear more in the IBCC meeting next month, but I do think it has done just what Al was describing, is that it's sort of brought to the attention of other roundtables that perhaps policy discussions and a more in-depth diving into some of these issues is an appropriate task for these roundtables.
Thank you. So we do have a motion. We do, but we're going to finish it. All in favor, all opposed, say nay. I didn't need my glasses for that one.
Thank you.
Alden, I apologize for interrupting.
Motion passed.
No, that's okay.
Congratulations. No worries.
Good job. That's it. Yep. Thank you very much. Thanks to all the people who contributed. Okay. We're gonna try to do this in 7 minutes now. You may know that as a part of the crisis process to alter the 2007 guidelines, the Bureau in November proposed a supplemental environmental impact statement. That thing was released on the 14th of April. It's a big document, 476 pages. So, but we're going to try to touch on just some high level things here. I insisted with Al that we expand the Big River Committee meeting because for 2 years at least, I have been the Grinch that stole Christmas for you guys. I come in here every meeting, give you bad news. It's the world's coming to an end. The Colorado River's drying up. The lower basin are a bunch of greedy bleeps. Finally, some good news for you. And I wanted to be the one to give it to you. All right. This document is required to modify a record of decision, which was the thing that was the 2007 guidelines. So that the Bureau can't just change the way they operate. They have to go through a process, and that includes this supplemental environmental impact statement. We talked before about some of the proposals that came forward. Colorado and 6 other states put together the CBMA, consensus-based modeling alternative, that has some parameters around reducing releases from Lake Powell. California did not sign on to that. They put forward their own proposal. That was a lot about, we'll do some voluntary reductions if we get paid. The Bureau decided not to adopt either of those, and the SEIS has modeled 3 alternatives. The first is the no action alternative. That's a requirement of the NEPA process. If you're going to do an environmental impact statement, you kind of got to say, what if we don't do anything? That would effectively leave the 2007 interim guidelines in place. Then there were 2 proposed action alternatives. The first was to reduce lower basin usage by 13 to 28%. Now those numbers come from this. The 13% is, what if we just use the 2007 guidelines and the drought contingency plan of the lower basin? If we implemented both those things, that would be about a 13% reduction. The Bureau proposed on top of that another almost 2.1 million acre feet of reductions. That's the 28%. And they proposed, that action alternative proposes to distribute those shortages or those reductions by the concept of priority. So prior appropriations law. The second action alternative was exactly the same amount of reductions, 13 to 28%. But in this alternative, rather than by priority, they modeled what would happen if we just distributed those reductions to all users evenly by percentage. Everybody gets the same. And that can be kind of important when we're going to talk about that. The draft, which was released, does not recommend either of those alternatives. But those of you who are astute will notice that there's something kind of interesting missing from these alternatives. Anyone?
Evaporation loss.
There's no language about the upper basin. We don't have to do anything, right? So this is a tacit recognition of the fact that the problem is overuse in the lower basin. Pat yourselves on the back. Well, of course, our position paper and all of our talk about how that's really real didn't have anything to do with the Bureau really doing this, but we're going to pretend that it did. We're going to take some credit. Just kidding. Okay. All right. So real quickly, hydrological modeling, there were some assumptions which are common to all alternatives. Basically, if you've ever been to a financial analyst, you know, there's this thing called a Monte Carlo analysis, because they don't know how the market's going to behave. So they model a bunch of different changes in a range, right? That's essentially what the Bureau did. They looked at hydrology over the last 30 years, and they modeled each of those years in various combinations, just to sort of get a range of how the system would behave, including actually some conditions which were even drier than the last 30. For those action alternatives at Lake Powell, they modeled some revised tiering, changing the way they operate those tiers and reducing releases to Lake Mead. For Lake Mead, they added those additional shortages that I talked about, 2.083 million acre feet. And those things go up as in the model Lake Mead's elevation declines. And actually could go all the way to 4 million acre feet under the worst and most serious conditions, all right? So that's the hydrological modeling. There's a lot of science here. These I meant to say this at the outset. If you have peers or colleagues that you would like to use this presentation for, you're more than welcome to it. We'll have a PDF of this on our Google Drive, but the Bureau says they're going to make these slides available. These are just screen caps that I snagged from attending the Bureau's meeting online. But so the resolution isn't that great. As soon as they're done with their meeting tonight, which is going on right now, I think the presentation will be available. We'll make a better one, put it on the Google Drive. So if you want to use it, you sure can. Okay, so just real quick, that's our reservoir on the left there, Lake Powell. And what those three bars represent are that stream trace or Monte Carlo analysis. The big red bars are alternative 1, the blue is alternative 2, and the green alternative 3. In the no action alternative, in other words, if the 2007 interim guidelines live, almost 40% of the time for that range of hydrologies that they modeled, the river falls below minimum power pool, the dam falls below minimum power pool. So what that's saying is 2007 guidelines would not work going forward, right? Now, they did the same analysis for Mead. It's not quite as dire, but in almost every event, the no action alternative didn't work. We ran into some questions about operating tiers. If you go back, you see that that's for Powell, an elevation below 3490. We had in our mind kind of the 3525 problem. It turns out that 3525 is not minimum power pool. That's the top of the bottom operating tier. Well, when the reservoir falls below 3490 at Glen Canyon, that's when they start to have trouble running the turbines and have to start ramping down. So that's what they modeled. Right, so that's what they've modeled here. Okay, never mind that. What they said, this is right out of the Bureau's report. Critically low elevations at Powell and Mead, poor delivery and operations, loss of hydropower, bad flow in the Grand Canyon and ecological, reduced water availability, and the possibility of a threat to the US-Mexico treaty. So no action doesn't seem to make sense. Now, that analysis that I was talking about, that range of hydrologies as it varies, these are the envelopes. You really have to study these graphs. They're a little bit complicated. You really have to study them to understand. But I just wanted you to see that the Bureau and that young woman, Sarah Parker, put a lot of time and effort into those models and developed those envelopes. There's a lot of interesting things about them that you'd have to spend some time really thinking about it. But I do want to take a minute to look at this graph because it's fascinating. Okay, on the far left-hand side, you see the percentage reductions in total for the lower division. So 13% in the red, the no action alternative would be just the 2007 guidelines and the drought contingency plan of the lower basin. Then adding the Bureau's 2.1 million acre feet, that's those next two graphs, right? Now, if you look at the blue bar, that's the bar where the reductions in the lower basin are distributed according to the concept of priority. And Arizona is first out. That next graphic over to the right, that large blue bar, which is approaching 60%, basically because the Central Arizona Project reset the clock in Arizona's priority. If they were to distribute that amount of loss reduction by priority, they'd basically kill Arizona again. I don't know. They'd have 60% less water to work with. That, in my opinion, is the big impetus for the green bar. That's why people started saying, you know what, maybe we need to rethink this whole priority thing. That's a huge issue. It's an important idea. And we've got a lot to think about in terms of that. But I guess in California's case, they have already said loud and clear that if it's anything but reductions by priority, that there'll be court cases. And of course there will. And you know, we can anticipate that. Okay, this is the Bureau's summary right out of their report. In the no action alternative, high chances of very poor critical elevation performance. With the action alternatives, chances are improved of falling to critical elevations. Those percentages don't make a lot of sense to me, so don't ask me because I have to study that a little bit more. In order to achieve those reductions, talking about a combination of modifications to POW and additional lower basin shortages. That's the term they use for reductions. And then they're just telling us that action items 1 and 2 demonstrate ways in which additional shortages can be distributed. So that's the Bureau's summary. Here's mine. 2 things. 1, the 2007 interim guidelines didn't and won't work. It wasn't working and it's not going to work in the future. Secondly, the Colorado River crisis problem lies below Lee Ferry, Arizona. It's not us. It's not overuse in the upper basin. It's all down below. So that's my view. Here's a link to the actual report itself. I recommend that you get the thing in PDF if you want to look at it. It's a little easier to handle and manage. And at the end of this month, the public comment period closes. There's a link for getting public engagement with the SEIS. I will paste those links into the chat in just a minute. All right. Okay. Whirlwind tour of the supplemental environmental impact statement. Questions? Jonathan.
Is the words, the concept of priority, is that yours or is that the Bureau of Reclamation using?
That's their term.
So are they not recognizing it as a law that was defined by the compact in 7 states?
That's a dang good question, Jonathan. I don't know the answer. When Genevieve Johnson, the project manager for the Bureau, talked about that, that is exactly the phrase that she used. These will be distributed under the concept of priority and these pro rata by percentage. Do they believe they can do it some way other than the law? That's a good question. If we're digging
laws
into
or concepts, but we usually grant them a little more power than, you know, we can throw them out.
I don't think they meant the laws for concepts. I think they just said it's the concept of priority or the concept of equalization.
So one of them is codified and the other is not.
Oh, yeah.
it would be a big jump, wouldn't it? If they did anything besides priority, that would be huge. And what does that mean for us? I think we need to think long and hard about that.
Well, because that's a 7-state agreement, so you can't just pull 3 states out and say you're no longer going by that and the rest of you are. I mean, that would have an effect on every state that signed that compact back in 1922.
No doubt about it.
Yeah, you'd have to have a federal action to do anything like that. That'll keep lawyers busy for years.
Yeah, Ken.
Your second statement, I know these are your summaries, right? The problem is overuse in the lower basin, more or less is what you're saying.
I don't think more or less, that's what I'm saying.
Right. But it's not, you know, Colorado crisis also is because we're not getting enough water. But of course, there's more use.
Yeah, so Ken, you're absolutely right. It's drought and overuse in the lower basin. If there were no drought, they would continue to release 9.5, 10 million acre feet a year. But my point is they have built that appetite, Ken. They don't understand what it means to live within their means. And so in the last year, when we can only give 3.5 million acre feet, they still took 8.23 million out of cow, and they supplemented that with another 1.7 million out of meat to make their 10 million acre feet. spending more than is in the checking account. Okay. All right, with that, we are going to move along. You have heard a little bit about SB 23-295, the Colorado River Drought Task Force, and I would like to call, one more thing before, sorry, one quick comment. With regards to legislation, Ken and Tom and I have a Zoom meeting tomorrow with Senator Roberts to give him that overview of the supplemental environmental impact statement. We kind of missed our window before the legislative session ended. But nevertheless, I still think it's worth the time, 15 minutes or so, to talk to the guy and have him, he probably knows, we're not planning, I gotta tell him anything he doesn't know. But we are going to give this very same presentation to Senator Roberts. Okay, with that, Tom, are you available to start this discussion?
Sure. It's going to be short. There were competing bills introduced in this legislative session to come up with a way to do drought security program in Colorado, or demand management, as you've heard it called. And Jackie just texted me, they weren't introduced, they were proposals, they were not introduced. There was a lot of discussion around them. No one was happy with any of them. And it was just it felt like it was a little too quick to introduce them and get support. So in the end, the alternate was to create a task force to work throughout the summer and come back with some proposals for the legislature next year on how some kind of a program could be structured. And that has passed. In my understanding, it's on the governor's desk at this time. So that's that task force. If it gets signed, that task force will be started, and there'll be representatives from various interest groups at various geographical locations around the state. It looks like it's pretty fair representation for the West Slope and others interest groups. So that's kind of where that stands.
All right. Callie, do you want to add on that? Callie also testified in this bill process on behalf of Colorado Cattlemen's. So,
well, cattlemen's as well as the conservation districts. And so, thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. He was very kind about this. This has caused a lot of challenges and sleepless nights for a lot of people the last 2 months. But just a real quick overview. I would agree that we got is probably as fair a deal as we would have, or that we could have asked for on the representation. It has, while I find it very interesting, it's the Colorado River Drought Task Force. You can only imagine there's representatives from across the state. So a real quick count on that, of the 17 positions, there are 6 on the eastern slope, 11 on the western slope. I've got to break down more detail there, but don't need to spend time on that. Their purpose now is to provide recommendations for potential state legislation, which was nice that we got it down to potential. And I think if I remember correctly, it was shall develop state legislation to start with. Hopefully they do take into account the federal conversation there. In the House, or I don't remember if it was House or Senate side, when they were talking about it, I will tell you, the big Trans Mountain diversion municipalities showed up in a big way to testify and oppose it. So that told you there was some concern there, and there was, I'm just glad, I'll just say, I'm very glad to see that it's open out in the open and a conversation that's not behind closed doors anymore. I'll leave it at that.
I gotta type in on this. So one of the things that hasn't been said, the 2 bills that they were proposing basically gave control either to the state. So they were gonna buy ag water, and either the state would control that, or
Colorado River District with a couple NGOs. My problem with this is it's basically high and dry. So I had a big problem with this and so, this is something we've really got to keep an eye on. If it happens, and it probably will, we've got to make sure that it stays on this side of the mountain and Colorado River District has control of that, is my 2 cents. But we'll see, what happens with this, but we got to be really careful when it gets on this committee.
And
Go ahead, Kelly.
I would just say, I really hope that the Basin Roundtable will stay heavily engaged in this. They are going to have up to 12 meetings between June and December. They're going to be meeting a lot. They did write in the bill, they had to be open to the public. At least one meeting had to allow for public comment. But I'm frustrated the Basin Roundtables were not at all involved in this conversation.
The duplication effort point was sort of about it. I was like, what the? Don't you know about the roundtable? Are they not pulling from reflected knowledge that we've had in the roundtables? Are they using that?
And I understand that. Just be glad that we got it into a conversation for the summer rather than a bill that we would have to take the least of 2 weeks. That's where we were at.
Mr. Chairman.
A couple of things. Will, you hit something that you said it right. One, this group, we just got done wrapping up a large VIP effort that took us almost 2 years to complete. The governor just signed in a state water plan here at the earlier part of this year. Why the hell did we do all this work if they're not going to pay attention to it? Okay, that's a lot of hours that many of us dedicated to it. That's what this grassroots group is for. Second, there's the ability already demonstrated in the state, and I will argue, and I know there's others that will argue, that shows that there's the ability for Western Colorado with the entities that already exist to fulfill this need. But for some reason, there's some gross prejudice, in my opinion, that I'm seeing happening towards the Colorado River Basin in Western Colorado, not allowing us the same latitude that's happening in other basins across the state. So I want to continue to be involved in that discussion. Obviously, I'm very interested in compact issues because 45% of the district that I work for is subject to compact curtailment. So largest percentage of the state, even though we're a small district, let's take 45% of your water and wipe it out and see what it does to your district. Schools and hospitals ain't gonna fare so darn well. So my district's got a real dog in this fight. So I want to make sure that this roundtable does stay involved. I know I'll personally stay involved from the district that I do, but also through the river district, because I see some real conflicts and some questions on why the prejudice is there and not giving Western Slope the same latitude as the other portions of the state. It's been entitled by the state to assist them to maintain compact compliance.
Good point. Well, all good points.
I just
Yeah,
have a
Bill, go ahead.
Real quick question. How are these people appointed to this? What's the process?
So each one of them gets appointed from somebody else, basically. So there's 2 from the state government. So basically the governor appoints a couple, well, I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's 2 out of the DNR, I think. Something like that.
And gives her the point.
Yeah, and then there are 2 tribe members, so the tribes appoint those. The Colorado River District appoints their person, the Southwest District appoints their person. Then there's ag on the western slope, right, 2 from the western slope. So what they did is they divided it by Colorado River District areas and Southwest Water Conservancy District, these are what they're called in the south end. They 2 ag people from those areas get appointed, but they're by either like somebody, the Senate or the Speaker of the House. I think is somewhere in there. They have everybody is appointed by somebody. So
They're appointments.
they are appointments, and so there is also one that is a statewide ag organization, so that makes 3 ag, plus 2 primarily ag represented from northern and then from southeast water conservancy district as well. So that is they're primarily ag out on the plains, but they get a lot of their water from the Colorado River. So they wanted to see 3 municipalities. Actually, maybe only 2 municipalities. And then industry has a representative as well. They're all appointed.
Keeping an eye on who gets appointed
Yes,
is gonna be pretty critical.
yes. And I think that it wouldn't hurt for, anybody that's interested in it needs to start having conversations with those that can help encourage in the bill that identifies who is going to appoint each one.
Okay,
So quick question, is the
Frank, go ahead.
urgency of having 12 meetings before the end of December so they can get stuff for the next legislative session? Is that
That's what my understanding.
how it's gonna work?
Yeah, it's gonna, that's cramming a
So
lot.
they're gonna start in June through December.
And there was the conversation about, remember, there is such thing called as water time. And that doesn't happen in 6 months. But that's where they're making this. That's what their point is.
Jackie put a link to the Senate bill up in the chat box for anybody.
Yeah, that link will also be in your chat here in just a minute.
When are they gonna start appointing all these people?
They have to be appointed, I think, by, it's
July.
like right away, it's by July.
Fairly
Yeah,
soon.
the meeting started in July, if I understand.
And then are they getting public comment on who gets appointed?
I don't think so.
I doubt it.
But there is a public comment period within the meeting.
Yes, yes.
So you can still comment during the meetings.
Yes.
Okay, parting shots on legislative update, Tom or Ken? All right,
Jackie's got July 15th as the deadline, so.
is the deadline.
Yep, thanks, Jackie.
That makes sense. Okay. Did I use my 20 minutes?
Adequately.
Just like you always do, yeah.
Oh,
Just like,
okay.
Let me just say that we will have this meeting tomorrow. If something significant comes up from our discussion with Senator Roberts, we'll be sure and share that. The other thing is that the next IBCC meeting, there's only 3 a year, is in June. I believe it's June 8th. It'll be in Glenwood Springs from 9 until 1. So we are your representatives. If there's anything, obviously, this is one of the many items that we'll make sure that we express your concerns. And we did propose during the discussion about the task force that perhaps the IBCC might have an important role to play. There were a lot of sharp elbows at the table. Thanks.
Next slide, Patrick.
Okay, Steve, if I may, before we go,
Yes.
we did have one grant tonight. Item D for the Coal Ridge. Can you flip it over? That was,
There you go.
that was requested to be tabled by the applicant tonight, so we'll be moving that to a later date. Came up with another 5 minutes for you, buddy.
All right, so we did get notice to proceed on CWCB grants given to Yampa-Tika, the Yampa Dashboard Project and the White River Integrated Water Initiative Phase 3. So all of those got the notice to proceed, so they can start spending money. I wanted to talk a little bit about the discussion of grants that were not recommended for approval from the grants meeting and how we handled that. Preliminary grant funding for the 2024 grant cycle. Fortification Creek Stage Sensor and Telemetry is our first grant application. Norvale Ditch Infrastructure Improvements is our second. Coal Creek Mesa Ditch is the one that got tabled, and the Kawa's Egg Drought Resilience and Innovative Water Conservation will be our last one. I've got minutes from the grant meeting that are in the packet and are out on the web. And I wrote grant summaries for all 4 of the grants, just single page summary of the grants and what they're all about. So next slide, Patrick. So one of the original premises of having the grants committee was that we didn't want to become a gatekeeper. But we had a number of unusual requests at the April grant committee, and it was, we had lots of discussion about it, and it was decided that in the future, our grant requests would, that come forward to this basin roundtable, that they will have a recommendation that would include sending the grant to the full Yampa-White-Green Basin Roundtable with either the grant committee's support for approval or the grant committees that we do not support approval, or we couldn't come to consensus. So we try to operate on consensus. Normally we do. If we have a split decision, we're gonna leave it up to you guys to cast votes. We'll bring it to you. You feel free to vote one down if that's what you want to do. But it didn't get our unanimous approval at the grant committee. So on the required action summary page in the presentation, it will be clearly stated whether the grant committee is in favor of approval of the grant. And that's on the page where I got the motion and how much it is and everything else. So, any questions on that? Comments, concerns?
I was just gonna say that the grant committee will always forward a grant application to the roundtable, but with or without a recommendation for approval.
Yes, yes.
So
And
not
that's how it should work. There's a lot of us who just can't do, you guys do so much detailed hard work. There's a lot of us who can't attend that, Steve, so I think it's perfect. the way it is.
Yeah, no, so it was just, it was a very unusual grant cycle this time. So, Frank and I talked about it, we got brought Olden into the loop, and that's how we decided to go forward to make sure that we weren't gatekeepers.
Steve, is that
Yeah.
something that needs to be incorporated into the rules for the grant committee? That this is the way it's gonna be handled moving forward?
Yeah, so what I'll do, Tim, is I'll take our guidelines, insert that, there's a couple other things that need to go in there. And then bring them forward to say, here's the revised grant guidelines, because we need to do that every so often anyway.
Good job, that's good.
Okay, go ahead, Patrick. Okay, so here was my summary. I don't know if it ties to Jeff's or not. I was under the assumption that the CWCB had to approve grants. And any grants that were approved, any amount of money that was approved that come July 1, which for us is the May meeting. Any grant that's approved by CWCB on July 1 is counted, and then $300,000 could come from that. So I'll give Jeff a call and we'll work through if they've changed the process or not. I don't know. So I do know that there's $250,000 worth of grants being heard in 2 weeks. Melanie, when are you? So
Next week.
next week. So there's 100,000 for the city of Craig's Water Park project, Yampa Corridor project, and there's 150,000 of basin funds for the Maybell Ditch project that will be heard next week of basin funds. And I had counted on those being in the 2023 grant cycle. So, but I will figure that out.
I'm not clear, maybe we don't need to take time for this, but what did he say that exactly contradicted that?
Trust me, I don't want to take the time to explain it.
Okay.
But maybe I misheard it, but I'll get it squared around.
All right, perfect.
So tonight we're gonna hear from the city of Craig. On the Fortification Creek gauge, they're asking for $10,000 of basin roundtable funds. The Norvell Ditch infrastructure improvement is asking for $99,750 of basin funds. And the Kawa drought related projects are asking for $75,000 of basin funds. They coupled that with, my take is about $46,650 of statewide funds. and about $29,400 of matching for that. And I say that because the numbers in purple under there, the 625,000, so all 9 basins are involved in this request, other than Metro is at 25 and everybody else is at 75,000. Correct. There's $388,750 is being asked for in the overall grant for statewide account. I just took our 75 and delved it up into the 46,650, and then they'll have matching of about 245,000, and we won't be doing the ditch monitoring. But I had our combined projects with that 12,000 out of it. We should have been about $244,000 in combined projects, which accounted for the Sarvis Creek or Bear River and Sarvis Creek monitoring, and the town of Oak Creek Sheriff's Reservoir would have put our remaining funds out of the 400,000 we approved to 155,000, and would have put our grant total as of put our grant down at 461,000 right before we would have added 300,000 to it. So the good news is we have money to spend. We don't have to worry about choosing one over the other at this point in time. So we can just vote on the merits of each grant. There's no financial constraint that we're under. Next slide, Patrick. Okay, so our first slide, our first grant will be the Fortification Creek Stage Sensor and Telemetry. Will be presented by Melanie Kirkpatrick from the city of Craig. And the documents that are in our grant folder for this project are the Yampa-White-Green grant application for the Fortification Creek project, the May 2023 Basin Roundtable meeting grant summaries, and the April 12th, 2023 grant meeting minutes. So you can take a look at those while Melanie's presenting. And Melanie, you're on.
Thanks, Steve. I'm Melanie Kirkpatrick. I'm with the city of Craig. One of the hats I wear at the city is grants administrator. Therefore, I'm here tonight to present our project to install stage sensor and telemetry equipment on Fortification Creek monitor. The project's fairly straightforward. You can go to the next slide. The map on the right-hand side, this details Fortification Creek in relation to the city of Craig. In the 1980s, the city transferred senior water rights from the Craig irrigation ditch at 1.33 CFS and Fortification Creek at 7 CFS to the city's water treatment plant for municipal supply. As part of the decrees, the city can divert these water rights when sufficient physical water is flowing past the Craig irrigation ditch head gate. So the measurement is critical to protecting our existing pre-compact water rights and in demonstrating efficient use. I'll note that Wilson Water Group just completed a water rights analysis for the city of Craig. And this project was identified and recommended as part of that process. You'll see the project components that we're asking for funding in support of. The ultrasonic measurement equipment, which will be supported by solar powered battery components. And then we were mindful to choose equipment that integrates in with our existing data system, the City of Craig water plant. And then I'll also note on the slide, we're looking at the 13th Street Bridge as the possible site location for the new equipment. Next slide, please. So project need, really, you can't manage what you can't measure. So it's crucial that we modernize the low flow monitoring at Fortification Creek in order to meet our decree terms. The monitoring equipment will enable remote real-time monitoring, which is critical for measurements But also for manpower, I think everyone's kind of spread thin for capacity and bandwidth right now, and so those will just radio telemetry back to the water plant. And then efforts to secure city of Craig water rights and prevent municipal water supply shortages. Next slide, please. Again, a pretty straightforward budget. We're requesting $10,000 from the roundtable. Our total project cost is $16,581. We're not making a request to the state fund. The city of Craig is making a cash match, just shy of $3,500. And then we're also proposing a little over $3,000 in in-kind support for installation of the equipment. And then lastly, I'll note, I think Frank asked a question during the grant committee round that I wasn't unable to answer at that time, so I just wanted to address that tonight. And I believe the question was basically if we had any other areas in the city's water portfolio that pose the same issue at fortification right now, essentially the need to measure and document in order to show beneficial use. And we do not think the city's in the same position for our other water rights, since our other water rights are all in the Yampa River. Fortification Creek is unique in that there are no stream flow gauges present. So we're having to develop our own measurement system for low flow conditions. It does sound like we could be requested to show that flows in the Yampa River at the head gate of the deep cut ditch are sufficient. But we believe there are enough existing stream flow gauges existing on the Yampa, so we could avoid installing new measurement for basic application. So that would be the only potential. So that's kind of everything in a quick nutshell. Again, pretty simple project, but an important project for us. Any questions?
Previously, how were you using that? Were you using that water for the city?
That's a great question. I'm not sure if we were pulling that water. Again, we can't, there's no way to measure right now, and so.
So they're not pulling the water for the Basin Creek, they're pulling the water.
Right.
For the water supply, but they're backfilling. Because the fortification creek comes in just below the water plant. So so whatever that, their water right that comes down fortification, they can pull it from the Yampa because it's being dumped into the Yampa immediately after.
So is this to secure your water right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's your water right there, and then that seems some of our water right as well.
Sure, yeah, and to make sure the reporting is.
Yes. Yeah, thanks, Steve.
With the recent flooding that happened at Fortification Creek, does that change your proposal at all?
I don't believe it does. I think this is kind of like a baby step to monitor low flow conditions. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to affect high flow right now.
Well, I guess even equipment placement, because the river was quite a bit higher than what it normally was.
That's a fairly higher bridge compared to some of the
Okay.
others.
Yeah, and I think they have the option, like our staff will go in and remove like the solar panel
Gotcha.
each winter. And so I think they'll have a little bit of option for flexibility with application. Yes.
So if your measurement of Fortification Creek were insufficient to meet the water, right, would you curtail your use of the Yampa?
I don't.
They couldn't pull, they have to go back to their Yampa right for the city, for the intake, but they wouldn't be able to pull that additional water that they're not getting out of fortification. So they just have to slow down how much water they took in.
So they'd reduce the Yampa? Is that-
Yes, yeah, they'd have to reduce the Yampa if they can't make it up with the,
Mhm.
if they're under the call situation.
Sure.
Yeah.
And do you know what the water right is? In like in seniority compared to housing?
I think it's detailed in our grant application. Yeah.
Yeah, you look under the Yampa-White-Green, but one of the questions we asked is that question.
So it's, yeah, exactly in that water rate section, which is and the priority.
That all the way after the presentation.
So I can read it to you. The project will protect the two City of Craig water rights. One, case number WE 2075 regarding Craig irrigation ditch, which is priority 49 water right, and that's for the 1.33 CFS. And then the fortification Craig irrigation ditch is priority number 8, which is the water right for the 7 CFS.
Yeah, it's just, is some of the thoughts still to kind of use some of this water right to maybe use some irrigation rather than using treated water for irrigation, I think.
So it's something that we were exploring in the water rights analysis situation about how we can further support ag. But we need to have a good inventory, and understand how that could work in the future. I don't know if that report is finalized. I think she just presented to council, so I can supply that to you, but I'm not sure if I have an answer for it.
Maybe it's more like in support of this, because I think the concept a couple of years ago was to use some of the resurfaced water rights instead of, using treated water, which would save the city quite a bit of money. I think that's kind of the intent. So that's just kind of a support question more so than anything, to kind of say this is a good thing. It's going to help us to create quite a bit.
Yeah, I think we would need some further infrastructure. So
Anyone online have a question, comment?
We can go to the next slide, Patrick. So the required action summary for this, the grant committee recommends this grant for approval by the Yampa-White-Green Basin Roundtable for the amount shown above, which is that $10,000. So I need someone to make a motion to recommend approval of the grant request for $10,000 of the Yampa-White-Green Basin WSRF funds.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. We have a vote, or we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving that motion, please say aye.
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 Okay, just waiting. All voting against the motion, please say aye. Okay, motion passes. Thank you, Melanie.
thank you. And on behalf of the city of Craig, thank you guys for your time and efforts that you guys put in to this group and the work that you're doing. We appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, next one up, Patrick. Okay, Norville Ditch Infrastructure Improvements is our second grant. The presentation will be by Justin Duzick, who's owner on the ditch and the ditch writer for the Norville ditch owners, and Jenna Hinkmeyer with CAA. Documents included in the grant folder for this project include the Yampa-White-Green grant application, which also documents the water right, the May 2023 meeting, BRT meeting grant summaries, and the April 12th, 2023 grant meeting minutes. And while we're on this slide, you'll notice that Jenna Hinkmeyer has the same last name as myself. So I am going to recuse myself from voting on this measure.
Same here. I've been involved with this, and so I'm probably going to step out for this team and discuss it.
Is there really a conflict because Jenna works for Community Ag Alliance and my order is that Community Ag Alliance is not getting any money from this?
So Ben Wade at CWCB asked the question, and I discussed it earlier with Alden. And the easiest thing without really knowing what Ben's concerns are is to recuse myself from it.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
Of that. And I'm supportive of that too. So if somebody feels they got a conflict, I'd rather be safe than sorry. Yeah. And I'm not an attorney. I don't think we got one in the room either, so.
Nope.
That's good.
All right, next slide, Patrick. So Jenna or Justin, you're up.
Okay, I will start. I'm Jen Hinkemeyer. I am the Ag Water Project Coordinator for Community Ag Alliance for Moffett County. And Justin, as Steve mentioned, is the representative for the Norville ditch owners as well as the ditch rider. Next slide, Patrick, please. So project description. The existing headgate structure would be replaced to accommodate new headgates, along with constructing a new concrete diversion wing wall, a concrete head wall structure spanning across the ditch and connecting the two wing walls would be required for mounting these headgates. Due to the orientation of this diversion and the slow moving water in Elkhead Creek at this location, a trash rack would be required to prevent debris from plugging up the main headgates and or downstream structures. Excuse me. Also, to accomplish this project, we will need a detailed engineering design, and costs for such are included in this grant request. Next slide, please, Patrick. So costs. We've got 3 tasks here. The first being engineering, design, and construction monitoring. The second is grant administration. And the third is demolition and reconstruction of the head gates for a total cost of $133,500. The owners, there are 5 owners on this ditch, and they have put in cash, as well as they're going to provide in-kind labor and equipment on top of the cash. We also have potential grant funds that we are asking for. I submitted an application to the Colorado River District's Community Funding Partnership in the amount of $11,250, as well as the Yampa River Fund, asking for $11,250. And what we would be asking for the Basin Roundtable tonight is $99,750 for this project. As I said, there are 5 stakeholders on this ditch that include Jim Hume, Wyman Elk Ranch, Bob Duzick, Gary Van Tassel, and Duke Duzick. So that's it in a nutshell. You can see by some of the pictures. Patrick, if you'll go back up 1 slide, please. You can kind of see on the wing walls where the cracking is and what would need to be replaced there. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Justin. If you have any questions, let's hear them.
Anybody in the room have any questions on this project?
I say one thing, this is on Elkhead Creek, so, right, you got endangered fish water that DWR is trying to get past this diversion, and with this head gate as in its position as it is now, that's hard to do. So there is the multiple benefit of like endangered fish water getting past this diversion that was not mentioned. So there's more than just trying to help these producers. It is also multiple benefit for endangered fish water.
So this is Doug. I have a question for Jenna or Josh, either one. So is this ditch incorporated and does it have a ditch company? Otherwise, the Yampa River Fund won't fund it. So if it's in a group ditch, they won't fund it. So I'm just telling you that.
So do you mean if they all have a business name, is that what?
So if it's co-owned ditch that all of you own part of the ditch, they won't fund it. So but if you have a ditch company and you're incorporated, they will fund those things, but they won't fund things that are co-owned ditches.
Okay, it is, I'm gonna have to get back with you on the incorporated part, but I believe that they did a grant fund, and I'm gonna have to look this up, but for the main diversion that goes across Dale Kid Creek, they did incorporate for that, and the owners, some of them aren't around anymore. Some of them have died from what that original was, so we would have to get that back in play, but it was incorporated at one time, and I'm sure the history is still there. There's I've seen Hume's ownership certificates. So I don't know where we would need to go to get that solved, but we could definitely do that.
It sounds like you guys are, so that sounds good. Thank you.
Okay.
So Doug, hey Doug, in answer to your question, Community Ag Alliance applied for the Norvell ditch to the Yampa River Fund.
Okay, thank you.
The money would be going, yeah, to the CA or the Colorado ag lines.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a good point, Steve. They did have that discussion like the other day. Ad nauseum almost, and it was determined that, because Community Ag Alliance basically partnered with them, that they qualified probably regardless of whether they're incorporated or not.
Yeah, the assumption was they weren't will just because of the paperwork and the people that died, and I mean, they could be incorporated, but it'd take a bunch of paperwork to try to figure that out. Any other questions?
Steve.
Oh, sorry, Kelly.
Sorry, there's a misunderstanding about the Yampa Fund funding protocols with that. So before you hang your hat on that, I think that it's private. As long as it's a private company or I know we did vote to fund the Norval ditch. So I guess I'm a little bit confused on why we're telling him he shouldn't apply for that unless he changes that. I'm not sure that's the case. I think there should be a conversation with the Yampa Fund manager, just so you don't do additional work before.
Mike's
Mike's in there.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was explained already that the applicant is the CAA in this case. But we do have one of the entities that are eligible is private incorporated, and that includes homeowners associations and private use companies.
Okay. All right, any other questions?
Yeah.
Oh, Kelly, yeah.
Like on the 19th. So I guess with that conversation would actually takes me back to my initial question. If for some reason one of these are not successful, do they have a plan B?
So Justin answered that for us. You want to handle that one, Justin?
Yeah, basically it depends on which one's not successful and how much that is. Obviously from the scope of the project, you can see that there's a significant work to be done there. Part of the cost involved in that is diverting that creek. So we got to build a dam there and get that creek diverted so we can get down there and cut that wall out. Once we get the wall out, that headgate structure there that you see to the right there, that's all got to come out. And in the top picture, the left, it'd be the north or the left wall there. That one's been replaced, so we're gonna try to reuse that one. And then the diversion structure is actually in decent shape. They built things pretty good back then. So, but the main cost to this is the headgate structure, the zero seal headgates. The headgates we have now, they work good for us. We just kind of flow control it, but where we get into trouble is with the Division of Water when they're doing fish releases and any kind of releases from Elkhead. That's not our water that's going down the ditch there. And we try to shut them as good as we can, but there's a certain amount that leaks by. So that's where a lot of the significant cost is in those head gates and that structure to hold the head gates. So like I said, it really depends on which grant doesn't come through, and yeah, it would put us off, for till we can seek out that funding elsewhere. I hope that answers that.
So I guess the quick answer is right now you don't have a plan B for the funding if either the Colorado River District or Yampa Fund did not come through. You would have to look somewhere else that you're not familiar where that's at yet.
Yeah, we would have to seek out other funding from another source.
Wanted to know if we had a plan B. Okay.
Anybody online have a question? Hearing none, Patrick, can you go to the, oh, there we go. Okay, so Norville ditch improvements required action. Just read it. The grant committee recommends this grant for approval by the Yampa-White-Green Basin Roundtable for the amount shown above. And I need a motion and a second for recommend approval of grant request for $99,750 of the Yampa-White-Green Basin Roundtable WSRF.
So moved.
Who moved?
Doug got the motion. Oh, Mike got the second.
Mike, you good for a second?
I don't care yet.
I don't want you and Doug fighting.
Okay, motion on the floor to approve this grant request. Any other comments? Hearing none, all in favor of recommending approval of this grant request, say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Anyone out there not in favor of recommending this grant request, please say nay. Okay, hearing none, motion passes.
Okay, we are running on time here, so
I know,
let's keep going.
keep going.
Just
Patrick.
wanted
Thank you guys very much for your time.
allowing us to present. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Jenna and Justin.
Thank you.
Okay, so agricultural drought resilience and innovative water conservation phase 2. Colorado Lake Water Alliance, Greg Peterson was here. There he is. He jumped in the big table. Greg's here to present that. The documents that are included in are the Yampa-White-Green grant application for this project. The same grant summaries are out there and the grant meeting summaries are out there. This one is a little bit different in that it's kind of it's posed as a pilot program, similar to the Upper Yampa program that they did with their grant program. So after Greg's done and we can ask some questions, Jeff Rodriguez said that that he would discuss how he feels this pilot program grant request kind of fits the drought contingency portion of the revised guidelines that came out in January. One of the questions we had, so there are two problems that we had with this grant. There aren't any projects identified in this grant. And the other one was a lot of the projects weren't necessarily standard WSRF, head gate, measuring device, that sort of thing. So after Greg's done, we'll give Jeff a chance to weigh in and he can tell us the CWCB's thoughts on this. So Greg, go ahead.
Great. All right. Well, thank you. I'm Greg Peterson. I'm with Colorado Ag Water Alliance. And so you have a big difference, a good way to put this. We have an unusual ask. I mean, and to be direct, essentially, we are asking you to grant us money for projects we have not identified yet. And we are a pass through for this funding. And so about a year ago, we were approached by a couple of different ag groups and also Nature Conservancy, because they had come to the conclusion that you're an ag producer and you want to try a project, either water conservation route that maybe isn't proven or maybe not proven in your area, and just a small pilot project. Where do you go for funding? Most federal options are on the table. Years, and if your project is $5,000, $10,000, that's not even worth those programs. And just in general, the ag season and their schedule just does not line up with a lot of projects. I mean, right now, you're either planting, irrigating, or bailing out your fields with buckets of water, and I'm already trying to get funding for 2024. So it's just it's a tough schedule to manage for them. And so the idea, and also, what if you have that idea that isn't quite proven, or again, in your area is different, it's not a standard NRCS practice, where can you get that kind of funding? And so we were approached to be the face of this program about a year ago and decided, well, why not? And it starts with the idea of what's going to help you in drought, what's going to keep you profitable. And the exceptions for this are sprinklers, drip, pipe in your ditch, gated pipe, building a new reservoir. I mean, I wish we could afford that, but we all know what that does, and those are all great improvements. We actually had about $15 million asks just for those kind of projects. Instead, we're focusing on alternative forages, alternative crops, unique irrigation management, livestock practices. And most of our projects this year, we have a bit over 30, will actually probably reduce consumptive use anywhere from an inch to we've got a foot. We have a few projects that will increase consumptive use, just more efficient. And so, but we're in each area, what's going to help you through drought is going to be different. So we're being really open to that, but we're focusing on what's going to help you and what's profitable. And each project we've paired up with an agronomist or a technical advisor. We also have Wilson Water Group is overseeing all of our projects, collecting consumptive use analysis, other data. And the goal isn't just to fund some projects throughout the state, it's identifying practices that are scalable and that we can replicate and get data from. And that's the real purpose of this. And then just those projects that are successful, start scaling them up. This year, we have a bit over 30 projects, totaling about 375,000. And most of those projects are one-year projects. Some start in fall, a lot are starting now. A couple projects are 2-year projects, especially those with regular, just a bit longer of a project. And we're kind of surprised with just the response we've gotten from producers throughout the state, and we're getting really unique projects that aren't appearing in a lot of programs, whether it is these alternative forages, alternative crops, new kinds of irrigation management, and that's been pretty exciting for us. And so what we want to be able to do is essentially keep laying the train track in front of these projects. The last thing I want is to have some great successes this year and tell people, well, great, give me a year as I get funding and we'll wait. We just don't have time, really. And I mean, we're the ones with just the target on our back. And every year we're going to lose more farms, more ranches. And we need to identify practices or strategies that can really help us as a community, not just an individual operation. And so right now we're already planning, meeting with people, talking about projects for next year. In August 1st, we'll put out our RFP for projects. But one thing that we've done is we work with people on their ideas, fleshing them out, putting together a budget, putting together an application, getting the right expertise we need so we can put together good projects. December 1st is the deadline. Then we will pick projects in December, start issuing contracts next January. And so right now, we're pulling together funding to continue so that we can do about 30 new projects next year and scale up to 20 current projects from this year. What's been pretty exciting is we're secured, we're going to have the matching funds for this year. Is that the real goal is, I mean, I'd like to do this for multiple years. Currently, we're talking with NRCS, hammering out a contract where they're going to match this money that we're securing from all the basin roundtables, talking with NRCS for other programs that they have, the River District. And at the moment, it looks like we're going to be doing this of 30 new projects, scaling up 20 projects in 2024, 2025, and 2026. And so that's where we're at right now. I think next slide. So I think that might cover everything. All right, yes. I just want to go through this. And like I said, a big part of this is collecting data from every project, just on water use, economics. We're going to have a technical report out at the end of every year with all of our data and also just one pagers on each project. Most of our projects, we're going to be doing tours in the summer. And part of the purpose of that is for the general public, but really, I mean, a lot of these farmers and ranchers, they learn by seeing what their neighbors are doing. And that's a good, the focus of those tours is identifying who are we going to scale these up with. Is it going to, and it doesn't have to be exactly the same. It can be, okay, what do we need to adjust to make this work? But we're already starting to plan some of those for this year. Next slide. So top part is our project budget. This year, our cheapest project, $2,000. Most expensive, $32,000. Average cost was about 13 grand for each project. And for us to continue to do a similar number of projects, outreach support, technical advisory, we want to continue doing that. We've gotten approved by every roundtable so far. We have you all today, the Gunnison next week. We've got funding from Northern Water, Walton Family Foundation, going to be talking to Southwestern, Upper Gunnison, and also working on NRCS Colorado funding for the next couple of years. So that's quite a bit, I think, but really, we're from you all, I mean, not just having a yay or nay on this, but if we do move forward, some real opportunities to get you involved here is we've got a committee, a lot of different, it's made up of representatives of a few environmental organizations, the River District, Colorado Department of Ag, and then quite a few different ag organizations. Only the member groups that make up CALWA are all on that committee. They do project selection. It would be great if you all wanted to have either a member of this roundtable or just someone that you're familiar with in the region with ag background who wants to be a part of that committee. That would be wonderful, get their input. And we're already starting to meet with people and drumming up projects for next year. And that's really where our best projects this year are the ones that we spent time last year talking about with people. And I mean, just last week, we were in Trinidad talking with a guy about forage kochia on dryland parcels that he has. Yesterday, talking with people about these irrigated parcels where they don't irrigate right uniformly, where they have in a lot of years, they don't have the water to irrigate the whole field. Well, let's change the forage mix where there's section of the field that you have that you're always giving water to. Let's do an irrigated mix. On those other sections, let's do a dryland mix. And talking to people about growing sandpoint, tons of intermediate wheatgrass. It would be really great if we could have a collection of projects in this part of the state of people trying different forages, seeing what works for them. And if we spend 5-10 grand on a project and we learn that, okay, that forage isn't a great fit, that's money well spent. I mean, not all of these are going to be successful. We got to really start trying to find what's going to be suitable for each of the different parts of Colorado. So I will stop right there.
So on
in your meeting packets on page 36. At the near the bottom of that write-up for that, it lists all the advisory group members that Greg was talking about, but it lists them all by name. So does anybody have any questions for Greg? Yes, John.
With the NRCS, pending funding, is that gonna come with design criteria requirements?
No, so these projects, there is no design. on this. And that money we will only use on staff, because as soon as we use that on in the ground projects, all of a sudden, you have to make sure is this wetland, and so, yeah, that's all we're gonna be able to use that for.
I just have a comment on this. So I've been following Greg and his little group for quite a while. And actually I get, 4 or 5 calls a year, people asking about roundtable money and then when you explain the process, it's a no.
Yep.
So I sent him to Greg. He's the first number I give him is call Greg. I'm a big supporter of this, even though it might not totally fit our criteria. I am in support of this. And I would be the first one to say, I make a motion to pass.
Well, before we do that, Mike, what I wanted to do is go through the questions in the room and online, and then I've got Jeff Rodriguez standing by from the CWCB to kind of explain how he sees the projects that Greg's talking about, because they're not WSRF, guideline projects, they're more drought projects, but Jeff was gonna give the CWCB's take on it.
Okay.
And then you can say, let's go.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm on the grants committee and I did struggle with this one a bit. Because there wasn't any specific projects associated with the request. And I guess the comment I want to make is there is a possibility that this money, if granted, would not go toward any projects in this basin.
No, this money will go towards projects with this.
So even though those projects are identified, will that money sit somewhere? So when projects are identified, they would be used?
Yes, and so we're putting I'm as long as we can 3 years out on this application.
Okay.
Because I'm like a great example of this is North Park. And it's just, there's just not a lot of people there. And are we gonna be able to spend $75,000 in projects 1 year in North Park? Probably not. No, that's half the county.
And maybe I misunderstood because I thought it was money that was gonna go into the pool to help identify those projects and work on pilot projects, but not necessarily some of that money might or will be spent in the basin. It sounds like that money will be spent in the basin. Once those projects are identified, if they're identified within that 3-year time frame.
Yeah, and we'll probably be, I'd say in most places, I imagine we'll spend through that $75,000 next year.
That helps clarify a little bit for me, for sure.
Bill, I just have a comment. It seems like this is very similar to what we did a few years ago when we gave the Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District a block grant to then distribute as smaller project grants through that process. And does that make sense?
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, it was,
I forgot all about that.
that was more streamlined to,
Yep.
head gates, measuring devices,
Right.
those sorts of things.
And
That looks a little more wide open.
different types of projects maybe, but same idea where, you can get that $5,000 or $10,000 or $2,000 amount into the hands of somebody that can put it to good use.
Kelly?
So I guess, tying to the question about if it would be used in the basin, I'm pretty sure I know some folks that will make use of it. So we've got, the initiative, we haven't really identified it as a priority right now, but there has been that conversation about drought contingency planning and that kind of stuff. So those conversations are happening in the White River quite a bit. And so I'm pretty sure I know some applications.
Go ahead, Will. Oh, sorry.
So yeah, not to beat a dead horse, but I kind of like what Frank was saying is like. So if we grant $75,000, is that gonna be just set aside for the Yampa-White-Green projects? And so like somebody else runs through their money is, what we grant is not gonna be used for those projects? Correct. Okay, that was kind of what I was wanting to figure out, like Frank was too, I think, so that makes me a lot more.
So if this does pass, would you be coming back next year to give us an update on where the money may have gone out of that 75,000? And are you gonna be asking for another 75?
So I won't be asking for money. No, sir. I'm gonna probably be at every roundtable this winter and about what projects we selected for 2024, what projects from this year are we scaling up, and just general feedback.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, you go ahead, we gotta wrap this up though.
I know, we need to go.
So you said you've been to other roundtables and they've accepted this?
Yes,
Is
so
that without 1.13?
including statewide fund and so the only one we haven't gone next week is Gus.
You've got some basins, but all of the basins have.
Correct.
So this is Doug. I just had one question. I think, Greg, you presented two different applications to us at the grant committee. And one of them was for virtual fencing in Routt County. Is this the same one? And I'm not in favor of that if that's what this is. We should be funding water projects and not virtual fencing. So I'm confused here.
Yeah, no problem, Doug. So that's a project that's happening this year that's already funded.
Through a water plant grant.
Through a water plant grant.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So Greg, I have a question for you. So you're asking for $75,000 of grant funding, and if you consider our 75,000 over the 625,000, you get about $46,000 of $46,650 of the 388,000 that you're requesting from the statewide fund. And then there's another $29,400 of match money that would be the percent of the 75,000 over the 245,000. So all of that totals about 151,000. Is that what you're suggesting could be spent in the Yampa-White-Green Basin is our kind of allocation of those funds?
I'd say at least that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure, because those were my numbers. I had to flip that up to see what our take was, our split was gonna be.
Yeah, and so that, I'd say at least that on top of, I mean, just next week, I'm gonna be meeting with Colorado Springs, Denver, Aurora Water. I mean, we can't stop them doing what they're doing, but we might as well take their money. And so that's also gonna be part of this.
Appreciate your honesty.
Okay, Patrick, can you go to the slide? So I just wanted to read this before I give Jeff a chance to weigh in, but the grant, so this is the grant, this is a grant that the grant committee did not support the approval of this project during the grant meeting. No projects were identified in the grant. Although the language within the grant suggested that projects would be found and implemented within the Yampa-White-Green Basin confines over the 3-year period, most of the projects that were discussed during the meeting did not fall within normal WSRF guidelines or projects. And CWCB staff, Ben Wade, offered the explanation. They would only be pilot demo projects with a strong water tie to a measurable result. So can you weigh in, Jeff? Give us CWCB's take.
Yeah, I actually brought Russ in heavy hitter to talk about this a little bit, so I'll just kick it over to him and let him talk and fill in any gaps, but I think he'll be able to handle it.
Hey, I don't know how much of a heavy hitter, but I appreciate just having a few minutes, especially because I know you're over time, but I'm hanging in there for this meeting as well, because I think this is important. This is the kind of innovation that we need to have in the state. And what I think Greg said is absolutely true. I mean, we hear it all the time. Ag has a target on its back. We're losing ag at record rates. I mean, we know the projections for that, or we're going to lose more. We need to start innovating to figure out ways that we're going to solve that. And we don't always have the time to wait for teeing up the best project that comes through, when we can try to innovate, short circuit that maybe with new ways of thinking that could allow for a process that might, allow somebody else to take a crack at that. In this case, it's a full panel of people that includes CWCB staff as well. This is something that, I know we're in this situation now, certainly on the West Slope, where we've got, a good, looks like we're gonna have a good water year. We got good snowpack, but if you just go back not that long ago when the roots of this concept were kind of peak, early 22, we had a lot of, challenges. We've been living through a few challenges. And there was a lot of fear. We had some people that came to the CWCB board and several presentations. Folks like Paul Boucher, our director Boucher, spoke up, but we also had Mark Harris. We had folks from TNC, and this idea of we got to do something to innovate and try something new now was a consistent thread in there. This aligns well with, and I see it as us partnering with CAWA to implement, Agency Action 4.9 in the water plan, or at least a portion of that, which is to try an innovation challenge in each of the 4 areas of the water plan. And I see this, the kind of making good on that with the first installment that we funded through water plan grant that I think Greg has done a great job of, and really being transparent too, and kind of creating the GIS map features that you can go and check on this anytime you want when a project's up to date. It doesn't have to just be when Greg's coming to present to you. So, I will recuse myself from any voting on this when it comes through in terms of, how it comes to CWCB after this. But I have to say, I think that we have to take risks. And as Director Boucher said, sometimes that means we're going to maybe try some things that don't pan out, but we're going to have to try if we're going to make measurable strides to improve the situation, because it's too risky to not. And I think that this is an excellent opportunity where there's a lot of money that's being leveraged, and you're seeing like true cross-basin support from almost every basin, with the exceptions that Greg has noted. But I would love to see the Yampa be a part of this. I think that this is a good thing for Colorado, and I appreciate the time.
Thanks, Russ. All right, Patrick, can you take us back to the slide? Okay, so we've heard from everyone. So I need a motion and a second.
You already have a motion.
I'll make that
And I'll
motion.
second it.
Okay, you don't want me to finish reading?
No,
Hey, can I-
it's already up there.
Can I propose a friendly amendment to Michael's motion? Maybe we would feel better, Greg, if instead of sometime in the winter, if quarterly or on some periodic basis, you came and told us where the money's going. Okay.
An update on our agenda.
So that's I don't know, do we need it every round? I mean, they're two every 2 months, every other round table, maybe?
I guess what I would say, as you're, we don't ask, every grant has that requirement that they come and do a presentation. If we have room for, I guess, if nothing else. So I would say the same thing.
But the difference, Cal, the difference is that other grants are about a project. And this grant is not about that. So wouldn't it be, I would feel better, I think, if every other time somebody from CAA, Greg or somebody came and said, hey, here's where the money went.
We got time on the agendas.
What about just like an email, a quick email says, hey, here's what we approved this month.
Yeah. A write-up would be wonderful, and we can just include it with the meeting packet as well, if that's acceptable.
Good idea.
So that saves us on the agenda too. So
Yeah, time.
any other comments?
Just before we vote before we vote on this thing, so the recommendation Mike's making, or the motion, is the approval of $75,000 of Yampa-White-Green WSRF funds and $46,650 of CWCB funds, does that pose a problem with how your paperwork is going forward, Greg? What kind of motion are other boards making?
They're all making the same motion, yeah.
They're all making the same motion and with their piece of that carved out, okay. I just want to make sure that we weren't doing something that wouldn't match up in the big scheme of things. And I hope you would agree to hold us a position on that advisory board if and when we decide we'd like to be a part of that. And it'd be great if you could spend the $151,000 more in the Yampa-White-Green Basin in projects over the 3 years.
Well, I know that, I mean, the next step is I'm gonna be bugging quite a few of you, like in Cali, you know, I mean, I know Tom's not here, but Alvin, who should we be talking to right now about their ideas? And it takes months to put these ideas together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion in the room or online? If not, all in favor of approval of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, anyone not opposed?
Anyone opposed?
Anyone opposed? Please say nay.
Thank you. That's fine. Make sure we follow the procedures.
Okay, hearing none. Motion's approved. I believe I'm done, aren't I, Patrick?
Yes.
I hope so.
We're moving on.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. I mean, these are lively discussions, but they help us kind of formulate new stuff and what we do at the roundtable. So, and it's tough to always plan time accordingly. So, because you don't know what the discussion is going to be like, especially with this group. So, Peppo. And I believe they do have an action item that they would like tonight. So, I could be wrong.
We do have an action item. And would you like us to do an update first and their action item second, or your action item first and update second?
Let's do that business item first.
Business item first, all right. So, as a reminder, CWCB came and had all these pots of money, how they're funding the grant committee. Part of the grants funding that they did now was the $25,000 for each of the PEPO committees, whatever, the roundtables, right? The public education outreach, each roundtable can go in there and have a grant request of up to $25,000 for each year. So that's due June 1st. And Community Ag Alliance has been doing the PEPO stuff since like 2016, I think, maybe even before that. We used to want to get the just 6,500 to do the publication outreach, and that's why there was WSRF grants funds requested. Last year was the first year that we did the $25,000 grant request for the publication outreach. So just to review what we did last year for fiscal year 2023, we basically budgeted $9,775,000 for just the administrative support. That's for doing the minutes of the meetings and it's helping the subcommittees make sure that their meetings run well. For me, that as far as Community Ag Alliance, meeting advertisements in the regional newspapers, so at least the meeting notices are in the newspaper, because it's still probably the best way to reach people out in Rio Blanco, Moffett, and Steamboat areas. And recorder subcommittee support, right? So that our recorder can do the minutes for the subcommittees. That's the administrative support. Then in our outreach budget was $15,000 basically. So we've got canopies here, which will give an update here quickly on what we did that support. So when you guys go to these events with these canopies, we can give you $50 for your time to go get the canopies, set them up, take them back and put them back in the storage locations. And then we had $7,000 for videos. So hopefully by September, I can have you guys I'm not gonna have a video of that, but I'm gonna have a storyboard or script for you guys to approve for videos so that we can go ahead and get made. All right.
videos again.
Yeah, that's why we're gonna pay somebody to go do it. All right, now. This year's request for fiscal year 2024, so fiscal year 2024 for this Colorado, remember, starts July 1st. The funds don't really get into the contract until October, so October through September would be this grant request. Again, we're in this budget high level, we're just asking right now because that's where we're at. It's $10,000 for administrative stuff again, so $15,000 for outreach. We've had a suggestion we had a lively discussion today with the PEPAL committee about doing a storyboard map, okay? So what is a storyboard map? Well, it's a GSI thing that you have on the website. And you could put in all of the water conservation districts and their boundaries and have descriptions about it. You can put in reservoirs about the description, who owns that water. You can put in what the roundtable does. You can put in what Mount Werner Water District does for Mount Werner, town of Yampa, how they get their water, what Maker does, who gets its water, the Colorado, conservation, like in Douglas Creek Conservation District's down there. Okay, so we're gonna take some of the money and go and hire a contractor to get all this information that we need to build the story map. There's no way that we'll probably get the story map built on this kind of money, but at least we get it set, phase one, get everybody, all the stakeholders that need in there, what they want to put in that story map. And then we can go and build the story map and put it on our website. That gives you access to know who all the water players are, right? So you can promote yourself as a water player, know who all in the basin is a water player, for the public outreach to know who are all the players in the water there, as well as where the water comes from the basin and whatever else we want to put in that story map. Okay, it's a single point of contact that we can print. Yampa teacher can use it for their education, both youth and adult, etc. And then carry on the canopy support, right? So now we have these canopies. We're going to be asking you guys here to go out and do the outreach for the Yampa-White-Green Basin Roundtable at the events of like the stock dog trials or what's the word in Craig? Coming up grand Will-the-Wood, Grand Old West Days, got the Yampa River Festival coming up. So that's our basically requesting that you guys approve that the Community Ag Alliance on your behalf go out and request this type of grant for by June 1st. That makes sense, Alvin?
Yep, and what I understand is you're looking for a letter of support from the roundtable to go with this grant, and the Ken visited with me a little briefly here about getting we'll get a draft of that letter together. Yeah, so so this is not something we haven't done in the past. And it's timely, and I personally believe we need to continue moving forward with this.
So I move that we write a letter of support.
Second. Okay.
I just want to jump in favor. You may have noticed that some of your committee chairmen are inept. And having these guys help and support over the last several months has just been a huge difference for those of us in the handicap category.
Thanks for saying we weren't all that way.
The reason I'm in the corner.
Thank you for your support.
Oh, thank you. We do any other comments? Otherwise, we do got we're there to call the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Aye.
Okay, I went pretty quick. Sorry about that. All right, motion passes.
All right, continuing now with the update part here, Ken. Ken's gonna ask you guys about events and doing the canopy. I'm gonna give you an update what the canopy looks like. So what are you gonna be doing at these events with? So we have 2 canopies on order. We actually have the hardware received. We are getting the printed canopies is out to the print right now. Shop. This is what's gonna look like. So when you go to these events, you'll have this is set up. You'll have the top of the canopies. All 4 sides looks the same. Blue with our logo saying bringing together agriculture, environmental, industrial, municipal, recreational water users. Because that's basically what this roundtable does. You're gonna have 2 sidewalls that you can put up on the canopy as well. These are pictures. Kent, you should probably recognize most of these pictures. Sorry, we had to use the high resolution pictures. I know that all of you gave us some pictures. Again, you gotta remember, we're blowing these pictures up to 3 by 3. So, because it's a 9 foot by 9 foot wall. But basically you got the two maps there in the center. You got the snake map there showing how the Colorado is the headwater state. You can point about how much the water comes out from the Yampa and the White, as well as the map that Chuck did and the PEPO committee did there, the new map, the basin and the pictures. Yeah, that's what your canopies are gonna look like, and we're gonna generate some swag with you guys to hand out, as well as water and snacks. So, Ken, take it away. You there, Ken?
Hey, yeah, I'm there. I'm just also we're excited about, you know, these are canopies that are going to stand out. And we have a partial list of the events that we'd like to cover, but I'm sure when you see Patrick's list that he's put together with our help from the committee members, you'll go, well, gosh, you forgot this and you forgot that. So we have a lot of additional opportunities. We will have one of the canopies stored in the Steamboat Springs area, probably out at the Legacy Ranch. We'll also have one stored at the Chamber of Commerce with Jenny down in Craig, but that can be shuffled back and forth to Meeker for any Rio Blanco County events. But I want to renew my challenge to all of you to try to pick at least one event this summer that you can attend and be a part of this outreach effort. It's a really important part of it to put a face from somebody like our group. Our roundtable group is a very dynamic collection of characters here in Northwest Colorado. You need to not be afraid to show up at these meetings or at these events and have these discussions with people. This approach is new, but I have a lot of confidence that we have the right people, we have the equipment, we've gotten the support from the state. Let's make sure we have a really good, productive summer and take advantage of all the people that have water on their minds. That even if we did have a good wet year, anybody that understands water or has water rights knows that the drought is a long ways from over, and we have really big issues that we still will be contending with for the foreseeable future. So that was what I have. Patrick, what else do we have? Anything else we needed to cover?
Yeah, so you'll be getting an email from me for your roundtable members. I'm gonna give you a link to where this is. I'm also requesting any events that's not on the list or event that you guys want that canopy at. Caveat, if you say that you're gonna need that canopy needs to be at that event, I'm assuming that you're gonna be taking that canopy to the event. I guess I shouldn't say that because I'll never get the events listed, but anyway. The second thing is Water Education Colorado Basin Tour again. Here in the Yampa-White-Green Basin Roundtable. The roundtable through the WSRF Grant Community Ag Alliance has the $99,000 grant has sponsored that bus tour. So we're at the bus sponsorship. So that's a $2,000 sponsorship. We get one seat on the bus for somebody to tour that bus, so they can go for that whole 2-day tour. We're looking at suggestions of who that person should be. Does not need to be a roundtable member. But, you know, we have that, and then we will probably you will be contacted maybe by Jayla from Water Education Colorado about speaking somewhere on that tour. It's going to start up in Yampa, work its way down to Craig. They'll spend the night in Craig, they'll make it to Meeker, and then come back to Craig, back up to Steamboat. So we are touring the entire basin, or at least touching the entire parts of the basin. We're touching White, not just the Yampa. So like I said, speakers, we'll probably need to have somebody speak, most likely Alden or somebody from the roundtable on that tour. So that's June 6th and 7th.
Now, we did also, as a committee, approve the use of $2,000 of our PEPO funds to provide a sponsorship on behalf of the Yampa-White-Green Basin Roundtable as the bus sponsor. So we are fully engaged in this. Please feel free if you have something you want to contribute or be a part of this event. It's back to the more traditional roots of this. This year, we will have 14 members of the state legislature that are members of the Interim Water Resources and Agricultural Committee. So it's going to be a really good group, and they're genuinely curious to learn more about what we're doing up here. And here's your chance to have an audience.
So
I see Madison had her hand up.
Yeah, I did. And this might be a question for another time, but Patrick, on that calendar, I saw that there was already overlapping dates for events. Is there going to be any way to prioritize which events we're going to go to if they're both in Steamboat, or how is that process going to carry out?
We got, which dates are we talking about? I'll have to look at it. I haven't looked at it. I'm just collecting ideas right now. So, and then, yeah, we'll have to prioritize.
Okay. Yeah, no rush.
We got the Yampa-Wanavoo, and then we got the River Fund.
Madison, I would imagine that it will be the first one that will confirm that they've got somebody who's going to come and pick it up and bring it back is probably the one that's going to get it.
Okay, that sounds good. Thanks.
Is that everything?
That's all I got. Thank you.
We did it already. White River Management Plan. David, thank you for being patient with us.
I gotta say, you guys get right into it, and this was entirely predictable, that we were gonna be right at the end of the meeting. For those of you who don't know me, I'm David Graff. I'm Main Street Flow Coordinator for the Recovery Program. It's great to see some familiar faces and a bunch of new faces, and as always, you had really good discussion. And as usual, you're a little bit over time, and I get that. So I'll try to go through this stuff pretty quickly. And one more preface, I apologize, a year and a half ago, I think, a little after when I started with the recovery program, I talked with Patrick and Al about coming and talking about, what's a PBO and what's the status of the White River Plan and what about the Yampa PBO? We laid out this sort of three-part discussion about, let's learn about a PBO and recovery program, and let's see what the Yampa PBO looks like and how that's functioned over time. Since that was in 2005, that was fine. And then, segue into the White River and really kind of take it slowly and get everybody up to speed. But we got all kind of wrapped around the axle. The White River planning process has been slow, cumbersome, but I think we made really good progress in the last half year, and we're at a point now with a final draft plan that's approved by the White River Planning Group to come back to you and give you a little more thorough update with where we're at right now. So go ahead, Patrick, go ahead and hit the next slide. I've got a couple of just sort of pretty picture slides of, some sampling on the White River, which I'll get to do next week. Probably not with the sunny weather, but we'll see the next one. Just a reminder that there are listed fish species in the river. That's pike minnow up on the upper left. That's a large razorback caught down in the lower river. So that's why the recovery program is very interested in the White River and continues to be interested in the White River. Next. I wanted to just stop on this one just briefly. Again, it's a nice sunset picture, but one of the things about the White River that makes it particularly impressive and substantial from the recovery program point of view is some of the geomorphic processes, and it's similar to the Yampa in the sense that it's highly unregulated. There's very few storage vessels on the White or the Yampa that really affect the hydrology all that much. So you have like developing point bars, you have meandering rivers, you have different low elevations that access floodplains, you have cut banks and woody debris falling into the river. You have interaction between the floodplain and kind of like I see in Yampa, just driving up here. So anyway,
those processes are really important. These fish evolve with those processes. So recognizing that they're intact for the most part on the White River is something that we are all very aware of. Next, please. So I wanted to give you just a little bit of history of the program. I'm going to kind of blaze through this stuff. So again, you can ask me any questions. Al's got my contact information. So anytime you want to follow up, please do so. Go ahead, next one. The recovery program was established back in 1988, so we're 35 years into this thing. And it really came about because of the conflict between Section 7 consultation for water projects that introduce new completions with any sort of federal nexus, which could come for a core permit or operations on federal land. Anytime you touch the federal world, you would get a consultation with the Fish and Wildlife Service. If your project had a depletion component to it, that depletion became an injury or jeopardy opinion to the fish. So what was happening in the late 70s and early 80s was all these projects were coming in for consultations. There was a huge bottleneck and the onset before the program came about, every consultation was required to replace that depletion with some piece of water. And that was just really untenable, both for the service who was doing the actual consultation and processing this permitting, but also for water providers. So back in the 80s, the water providers, NGOs who were concerned about the fish, the 3 states, Colorado, Wyoming, and Utah, as well as reclamation. Now we have the Park Service, we have WAPA and Colorado River Energy Distributors Association. These are all the partners who made up this program back in 1988. So over time, it's evolved quite a bit, but their solution really was to work together to recover the fish. And to do that, those applicants, those parties had to come together and commit to certain activities that would provide offset, which included things like Elkhead Reservoir, where there's a component of water in Elkhead that we use for operations for fisheries when flow conditions in the Yampa are really critical. Next, please. These are the 4 listed fish. The upper left one is the bony tail with that very, very small caudal peduncle there. That's the end of the fish there right before its tail fin. That's why it got its name. There's the Colorado pike minnow. That's sort of the top tier predator that really had no other competition in the river. They used to grow, 5-6 feet, 60 to 80 pounds, anecdotal historical history. There's a lot of great pictures of these things caught around the turn of the century. I haven't seen one really like 100 pounds. So there's a little bit of mythology with the pike minnow, but I have actually held and caught one in the net that was about 3 feet long and 15 to 20 pounds. So it's not, they're still there, but there's not a lot of them. That one on the lower right is the humpback chub, used to occupy Yampa Canyon, and it's sort of, we're not sure if that population is extirpated. The good story about the humpback chub is it was proposed for downlisting, and it was downlisted from endangered to threatened back in 2021. The razorback sucker on the lower left is another White River fish, and it is also been proposed for downlisting, and that petition is now being sort of processed through the service right now, and it's looking pretty good that it'll go the way of the humpback in terms of downlisting from endangered to threatened. So that again speaks to some recovery progress over the 35 years of the program. Most of these the problems came about really, again, habitat, water depletions, passage and structural problems in the rivers, and largely non-native fish, which I'm not really going to touch on, but that is a huge problem, which we continue to struggle with. Next, please. These are the recovery program elements. I mentioned in-stream flow, I mentioned habitat. There are coordinators for each of these different elements in the program. We also do have a free system that we manage with a fish propagation coordinator. We have a non-native fish coordinator who works quite often in the Yampa River. Really pike in the upper part of the river and smallmouth bass in the lower part of the river. These continue to be problems that we work with water providers and CPW, largely folks in Utah, to really try to kind of make a dent in that. We're using flow management where we can. We've seen some real progress in the Green River below Flaming Gorge. We break that up into Region 1, it's down to the Yampa Confluence. Region 2 is the Yampa down to Jensen, and Reach 3 is like below there, all the way down to the mouth of the, well, down to Lake Powell. And I might not have that exactly right, but in any case, flow management out of Flaming Gorge has been used to really do the work of, 1,000 boats with crews trying to pull smallmouth bass out of the river. But the timing and the science behind it, it is, it's pretty tough. You have to have operation capacity and a fairly substantial work. Next, please. So when I say, Section 7 consultations were essentially streamlined, the streamlined depletion consultation under the Endangered Species Act since 1988. There's been 0 projects halted because of Section 7 consultations for depletions. There's been no litigation under Section 7 since 1988 on water projects. So that in itself speaks to the success of the program or the value of it. And the program itself, the implementation of the program elements, I work on flow, someone else is working on habitat, someone else is working on fish propagation and non-native fish management. These all come together. They provide sort of those offsetting measures in lieu of, one-to-one water augmentation that provide the service. And again, when I say the service, you may not know this, the recovery program, we are staff of the Fish and Wildlife Service, but we really work for the fishery and we work for those partners that I mentioned earlier. So the service is really the ecological services group that will receive your consultation request for your water project proposal, and they're the ones who actually render those opinions on this is jeopardy or you're in compliance with Section 7 or these are the offsetting measures you have to do. And that goes, the fisheries and the depletion consultations are one thing. They do the same thing for terrestrial stuff, for sage grouse and bald eagles and ferrets and all the rest of the listed species. And there's on the lower right, there's some again mentioned of humpback chub down listing and potentially the razorback side. Next. So that's the kind of the program history. We wanted to present just a little bit about what a programmatic biological opinion is. And one way to look at it is what I just described in terms of having the partnership come together and essentially work together to implement these management activities that provide benefits for recovery of the fish. That is a programmatic approach in itself. The whole umbrella of our program works throughout Colorado and Utah and Wyoming and the Colorado Basin to provide a programmatic and streamlined approach to Section 7 consultation. A biological opinion is something that you're going to get for every time you go to Fish and Wildlife Service. They will generate, if you have a project footprint, they generate a list. Here are your 6 species, which might include animals and plants. And then you get a consultation. You make a consultation request and they render a biological opinion about if this is not a problem, this is maybe some mitigation measures that you have to implement. Again, our program is really focused on depletion consultations and sort of just putting that into a programmatic framework to simplify and streamline those consultations. Next. When does Fish and Wildlife prepare a biological opinion or a PBO? Anytime there's a federal nexus on a project, I mentioned something like a port permit or a project that impacts, federal land where you need a right of way or some other project. So those are sort of the typical ones that water providers might run into. I was thinking someone mentioned NRCS. Potentially, if you're partnering with NRCS and getting money from them to implement efficiency improvements or something like that, that could be a federal nexus. If they would request Fish and Wildlife and say, hey, this project you're involved in. Is there a Section 7 nexus? Are there named species that could be impacted? So anything that may affect listed species or critical habitat becomes something that should require a biological opinion. Next. There's a lot of words on here, and Patrick, he can distribute or you can request this slideshow from me later if you want. The 15-mile reach in the Colorado River is a pretty good example. It's a complicated example of what programmatic biological opinion does. There were literally hundreds of consultations sort of in the queue, waiting, for processing when the Colorado River 15-mile reach PBO was established. 15-mile reach is a very important part of the Colorado upstream from the Gunnison, but just downstream from the very large canals in the Grand Valley. So there was always late summer a water depletion issue for that reach. It happens to be a confluence of good spawning habitat, good foraging habitat. It had diverse habitat because it's in the head of that big alluvial valley there. So, you know, there was a lot of reasons why Fish and Wildlife really keyed in on the 15-mile reach, but at the same time, there were literally hundreds of different projects proposed in the Colorado River. So, you know, to have a PBO specific to that location really helped water users in the Colorado River. It also helped the service do these consultations, so they weren't just like bogged down trying to process paperwork on Section 7 consultations. It enabled their work to go a lot more smoother too. The flip side of that is there was a whole bunch of upfront work that you got to do to get a programmatic biological opinion. There was a number of conversations, you know, before the 1988 recovery program agreements were signed. Likewise, in the PBO for the Colorado River, they did a whole bunch of work on what's the problem, where are the fish, what's the habitat problem, how are we going to find, you know, the water supply. So in the Colorado, there's upwards of 30,000 acre feet of water per year that I can utilize in some flow periods in late summer and fall. We also work with the Green Mountain operators and reclamation and CDT users on the Front Range to use some of that surplus water for, again, mostly based flow augmentation in late summer and irrigation season. Tomorrow we have a phone call on coordinated river operations for peak flow augmentation and begin scouring flows, creating those habitat conditions for good spawning is really important in that reach. We don't always get the peak flows. If there's an opportunity to bypass flows that would otherwise be, you know, stored in the reservoir, if you can time all those bypassed flows so that you can augment the peak, you can actually have more benefits to the 15-mile reach at the high flow or part of the hydrograph. With those operations, there's never a loss to water yield. That's something that's written into the cost operations agreement. Next. Here's one, you know, that doesn't have a PBO. The Green River doesn't have a PBO. PBOs right now are in the Gunnison, Colorado, Yampa, and we're kind of in dialogue on the White River PBO process right now as well. Again, the program feels like a PBO to me from a high level, but the Green River itself doesn't have its own unique PBO. But they operate according to the Flaming Gorge Record of Decision. Again, the Flaming Gorge, they have to go back for reoperations authorizations every 15, 25, something like that. The last time they did a reauthorization, they incorporate a lot of adaptive management principles. The science on the green was just kind of coming out about where the fish was spawning, what the habitat utilization was, the extent of bass problems, and how the Yampa and the sediment flux from the Yampa really created the habitat conditions in the lower green. So there's a lot of science that kind of went into the Flaming Gorge reauthorization. When they reauthorize it, they acknowledge that we don't know everything, but we're going to keep being guided by the science. So there's a lot of people doing a lot of scientific work, both Utah Division of Wildlife Resources, CPW, and Colorado Reaches. Barbel Fish Lab out of CSU does a ton of work down there. And again, it's just informs the management. Last year is a great example on drought relief operations, the DROA flows that they released to, again, augment the storage level in Lake Powell, going back to the earlier discussion you guys had. That actually worked to the benefit of the recovery program and the listed fish, because there was a little bit more slack to implement some of the flow experiments that happened down there. And again, fortunately, we've had a good water this year. It looks like they're going to recover that soil next. This is a chart, and again, I can't even see the numbers, so I'm not expecting to read all this. But in round numbers, this gives you an idea of the number of consultations that would occur in each of the basins and sub-basins, the amount of depletions that was existing and future depletions. So about 2.5 million acre feet of existing depletions, about 300,000 acre feet or so of new depletions that have been authorized since program implementation in 1988. Next. Oh, and there was, go back to that last one for a second. I completely forgot the whole depletion fee concept. That last column over there is the depletion fees. What they've done with the recovery program. They used to have sort of this ratcheted number where you would, like, depending on how many acre feet you depleted, you would pay a fee per acre foot depletion. They found that under 0.1 acre feet, it was not even worth discussing. There was too much paperwork. And then they modified and said, well, under 100 acre feet of water depletion for your project, you don't have to even pay a depletion fee. We would like to know and count that against consultations, but we're not interested in processing paperwork on a 20 acre foot depletion. Between 100 acre feet and 4,500 acre feet of water depletion under one individual project, you pay at this point, the fee has gone up, not exactly with inflation, but that was sort of the idea. I think it's about $23, $24 per acre foot of depletion. So if you have a 1,000 acre foot project, depletion of 1,000 acre feet, you'd be paying about $24,000 into this. That last column is an account operated by National Fish and Wildlife Foundation that we can tap into to lease water or do habitat work or buy a fishing net. Those are the kinds of projects that those depletion fees are useful for. Okay, now sorry about that. So this is, I think, where you want to be is in the White River. You want to get an update on the White River management planning process. That's our cover shot. Next. This is the outline of the document as it stands. And again, we basically approved final draft White River management plan last week at our meeting on the 5th. And it really just kind of goes through the first part is important, the phased approach. We really focused on phase 1 depletions. Phase 1 versus phase 2 really recognized that at the time that we embarked on this planning process, there really was no augmentation water available on the White River. So the service who was sort of in our meetings side by side as the White River planning group got together, acknowledge that, okay, we're saying you can go ahead and deplete a certain amount of water without having augmentation sources, but that's going to require you to do some more actions, and we'll get to that in a second. Again, it's got descriptions of the listed fish and the importance of the White River. It evaluates the existing the effects of phase 1 depletions that are contemplated, and they asked specifically for climate change, so there's sort of a lengthy analysis, and it really falls like out into that speculative what is going to happen in 2050. So we used a lot of the states, the water planning modeling. Wilson Water Group did a lot of work for us in this process as well to sort of look at, wow, 2050 maybe great leak in the depletion becomes just this really small component of what 2050 water depletions relative to the current conditions really would look like. And again, going back into chapter 5, there's a flow guideline, an interim flow guidelines document that makes recommendations, and it really codifies, or quantifies what the existing hydrology is into a lot of different sort of high water, low water, medium high, medium low, and a bunch. I think there's 6 different categorizations for existing hydrology and like what we might expect to see out in the future relative to those existing hydrologies if you added this little bit of depletion in there. Chapter 6 is the identification of the management actions, and then there's reporting requirements. If you're going to do a BBO, you certainly have to go back to the service and show them what you're doing and making progress in that due diligence. Next, and there's a list of all the partners in the White River planning team. So go ahead and hit the next one, Patrick. we really spent a lot of time, we had a draft that was nearly done, last Halloween. Acknowledging that our management actions needed refinement. We spent a lot of time in those management actions. Go ahead and the next one. Because one of the things that I probably glossed over very quickly, but with the PBO, you really need to have some assurance to get the PBO. The service needs assurance that you're going to implement the management actions that you described. And we had kind of this vague list of management actions that described anything from reoperation of Canyon Reservoir, tapping into system conservation and command management water, cloud seeding, some things like that were really sort of vaguely waved at, I think. So there was concern that we really needed to bring those down to the ground and start to look at who was going to actually do them, how to fund them, and how to get those commitments. So those lower two boxes are really looking at what a PBO now would do. And it requires, again, doing the PBO now is going to require a little more upfront work. And I can't read those exactly, but it would essentially, what does that say, Patrick?
Expedited ESA compliance for existing, okay, so PBO now will result in expedited ESA compliance for existing specified new depletions for approximately 1 month.
Yeah.
Implementation of management actions, provide shared goals for those working in the basin.
Yeah. Well, I got the gist of that. So, yeah, the PBO now results in ESA compliance for under that the formula that I described earlier, where you if you're falling into bin A, if you're less than 0.1, you don't even really have to send the 0.1 acre feet to 100 acre feet. You basically send a letter and don't have to pay a fee. 100 acre feet to 4,500 acre feet, you send a letter and pay a fee. Above 4,500 acre feet, I forgot to mention that one. You would pay the depletion fee per acre foot of contemplated depletion, and then you would also work with the service on developing a mitigation plan, because those impacts are significant and large. So you would not just have to pay a fee, you would have to work with the service and other partners who are interested in a mitigation plan that makes sense. Doing a PBO later, and the thing about the PBO in the short run is it takes more work, but your depletion consultations go a little bit more quickly. Right now, without a PBO in the White River, you're kind of under this really broad umbrella of the program, as I just described. The consultations take a little bit longer if you have a 500 acre depletion. You could take probably 4 or 5 months is what we've been told by the service to get through that consultation process. Both of these require that commitment to do some management action on the left side. The management actions through the PBO would be somewhat assured through the signatories to the PBO. On the right side, again, the management actions we would be looking at are what's in the plan now. And then we would go and try to wrap those into the way we do recovery planning in our program is every 2 years we sit down with all the different partners and within our group with all our different element coordinators and really describe, okay, these are the priorities for this year and the next year. And we go kind of through a 2-year planning cycle. There's not really assurances without a PBO that things would really be any different in the White River. Because we're working all over the Colorado basin. So the White River may or may not fall out as priorities in the PBO process. They would have to be priorities. That would naturally elevate actions in the White River, probably concurrent with what we're doing in the 15-mile ratio. Next. So this is an excerpt. I just wanted to make really clear. There's been discussion of how Wolf Creek kind of blends in. There's a Rio Blanco River water storage project. How does Wolf Creek kind of intersect with the process in the White River management plan? Right now, it really doesn't intersect. It is very explicit that the PBO, as contemplated under phase 1, it allows up to 6,150 acre feet of depletions for energy, municipal and industrial uses, 3,500 acre new agricultural lands, and this is in Colorado and Utah. And those are the depletions that are contemplated in phase 1 of the White River PBO. Phase 2 of the White River PBO is one of those checkpoints down there. When you have 10 years elapsed, another one is when you have augmentation supplies available. So if you have augmentation water available, maybe, that might offset a higher number of completions. So that phase 2 is up to, I think, 16,650 acre feet. So that acknowledges that if augmentation water were to become available, then the service under phase 2 PBO might actually authorize a bit more upfront completions. And then augmentation water would be part of that process. Right now, we're really talking about a phase 1 programmatic biological opinion for the White River, which again, to get augmentation water under phase 1, it's pretty tricky. There's there's no in-stream flow, there's no branches or like saying, here, take my water. So, I mean, those are the only things. Lake Avery, when I worked for CPW, we dumped some water out of Lake Avery from time to time, to augment flows through Pioneer Park, just east of Meeker, to try to make sure that trout fishery didn't die. That water couldn't get protected past Great Wampa Lake because there's no way to get it there. That would be something we could potentially work. Any other highlights there? Okay, next. So this is sort of a legal description from Colorado, one of Colorado AG's staffers who he really wanted to highlight the idea that a management activity needs to be reasonably specific, certain to occur, and capable of implementation. And I think that's the legal standard. That's what ecological services, i.e. the service, would be looking for. If we're going to authorize a PBO for depletions in this subbasin, we need to make sure that the management activities that we're looking at as offsetting measures are reasonably specific, certain to occur, and capable of implementation. And again, how this intersects with our recovery program world, it's a little bit complicated, and I don't really want to go into that much of a description about it. These three committees, the biology committee and the water acquisition committee, the WAC, those are our technical review committees. So anything to do with water management kind of goes through the WAC. Anything to do with habitat, non-native fish propagation, those go through the biology. Again, these are proposed activities sort of queued up for priority implementation in those work plans. And then the management committee, the MC, is sort of the policy committee that approves funding for things, approves the recovery implementation plan for a given year. And again, there's a lot of needs that we get into, but it just, again, just to realize that the program itself has a lot of elements that ensure that, there's thoughtful, mindful work toward what is really, we can't just do everything. We don't have unlimited resources. We got to prioritize what we're doing, and then be credible both to the water providers and to the NGOs, as well as ultimately the service who's authorizing this programmatic program. So right now, the implementation of management activities really depends on our priorities, our funding, the commitments, and the status of the PBO. And as I alluded to earlier, if there was a White River PBO, that would elevate the status of management activities specific to the White River, roughly equivalent to where we have other PBOs in operation. Next. Wait, did we see this?
Going backwards.
So there. So our schedule, again, I mentioned we had a final, kind of an early final draft, acknowledging that in Halloween last fall, acknowledging we didn't have our management activities really fleshed out or refined the way we'd like them. We spent a lot of winter and spring going back between the White River planning team folks to really sort of bear down on what those activities were, and then back and forth with our two technical committees to ensure that these things were credible and they met the standard of other activities that have been implemented in other basins that would be credible offsets to depletions, slacking on the So again, that was a long process through the winter and spring. And drafting of the plan has been, pretty long too. So finally, we got to this point last Friday where we have a final draft plan now that is now going into the queue of final approval by our two technical committees. And the management committee, I think, meets again in early August or late July. And we want them, the management committee, to be able to say, yes, we like this plan, this is a great plan. And whether or not there's a PBO, there's a good list of activities, there's good documentation of the status of the fish and the flow recommendations. So we feel like we've got a really good product, whichever direction the PBO discussion ends up going. Because we can, there's some things that are proposed in there that I think have some real merit. Before I get to a couple of those, there is those slides again. The spring, summer, and the summer, fall. The stuff in green is kind of where we're at now. We had the final approval of the draft final plan. We have these committee recommendations coming up through the next couple of months. And then we're going to meet again as a planning team in early August to really kind of hash out whether to pursue the PBO or to sort of pause the PBO and really see kind of where Wolf Creek goes. Because that's something, when we contemplated this a few years ago, Wolf Creek was sort of out there as a thing that may or may not happen. Now it looks like, there's permitting that is like ongoing right now. So one school of thought is to let's just kind of wait and see how that goes, see if there's a real need. And one of those slides, which I brushed by, it kind of goes back to the MUNCO, economy of scale when you do a PBO. There's a lot of upfront work that you need to do. The last steps to get to the PBO are really figuring out who's going to fund and implement the thing, these management activities, who's going to sign a cooperative agreement to get that done. And then a biological assessment has to be done on the management activities. It's kind of under the NEPA umbrella. Someone has to say, oh, these management activities, if implemented, do appear to offset the depletions that are contemplated over here with the water development activities. So you do have to balance those things. So there's a biological assessment that has to be done, a biological opinion that goes to the service. It has to come from another federal agency, like when the Corps of Engineers gets a permit for the endangered species implications, they're the agency that takes it to the service. In this case, I think it would be the recovery program taking it to our directors at the regional office in Lakewood. The regional office in Lakewood basically going back to ecological services in Salt Lake City, who does the Utah side, and Grand Junction, who does Colorado side, and say, okay, here's the package. We have a cooperative agreement to implement this set of management activities as described in the plan. We have a biological assessment that describes how these measures offset the depletions. Give us a PBO. So the service goes into their huddle, and that's probably a good half a year of a huddle right now, just given their staffing and constraints, and they could extend that even further. So best case is probably we could get a year from that August meeting is what I'm thinking. And we don't have a cooperative agreement. We don't have a biological assessment. It's been partially drafted, but they didn't have really the details on the management action that were necessary to get that done. And then again, certainly to do their consultation and write a final programmatic biological opinion. But again, that cooperative agreement to implement and fund and manage those activities, that's a really important part of that. Next, I think there's just a slide. Yeah. That's what the table looks like. That really starts describing the impacts and the steps required. And don't even try to read that. But again, it's a broad summary of I think we came down to about 13 different management activities that had that were specifically identified with partners that would implement them, and some of the impacts of the deletions plus the offsetting benefits for implementation. Next one. And this is just a very quick list of overview of a couple of them. Canyon Reservoir, it's a big main stem dam. It's just operated as front of the river. It filters out all the sediment right below there. Since a lot of the water is coming kind of from near the top, well, it's pretty warm down there anyway, so there's clean, warm water below the dam. It's great bass habitat. Smallmouth bass are really probably the worst non-native fish in the upper Colorado River system. You know, it's our listed fish, they're voracious predators. They really work really well as a site predator. So if it's clean water, you know, all the listed fish, especially younger juvenile fish, become just these little fleshy silver tubes, and they're really easy to eat. So that's a real problem. So we can throw flow spikes at them, like I was describing from Flaming Gorge, or do some sediment management, like in number 2, to cloud up that water or create, you know, adverse habitat conditions for bass. Those might be really like feasible things we can do. We'd have to have a lot of discussion. We'd have to work really closely with the Walker District to get some of that stuff done. Flow protection strategies. There's I've had other slides where I got into the flow protection stuff. It's a long litany of things. We probably need an instrument flow to protect any flow that she provided. We know instrument flows are not always popular or totally understood what the benefits or costs are for implementing instrument flows. There's system conservation, we talked a little bit of that, and demand management. If those really come to bear a lot of fruit, how do you actually utilize, you know, those water savings potentially for listed fish? So there's a lot of steps. Let's see, any more? I think this is the last one, which is really kind of our focus, whether or not we do a PBO. We like, some of us do like those management activities, but getting the implementation and coordination and funding and the commitments to implement those activities. Again, if we get to the PBO, there's going to be signatories on a cooperative agreement. Those signatories are going to say, we're going to get that done. Without a PBO, we would incorporate some of those management activities kind of by virtue of our annual or biannual planning cycle into what's called our RIPRAP, or Recovery Implementation Programs, Recovery Action Plan. So that is like a whole bunch of stuff going at you in a very short period of time. I apologize, you know, we should have done this over like 3 hours for 3 different sessions. Now we're open for discussion. Again, Al, you know, I want to hear what your thoughts are. We had a really good discussion last Friday. I had 2 real agenda items. One was to get this final draft plan approved by all the White River planning team. So we really didn't have to have more meetings and look at that anymore and work through things. I think it was done. I think it was done thoroughly and done well vetted with a bunch of different groups. The second one was to really decide, are we going to do a PBO? Are we going to pause and kind of see what the landscape is? There's just not a lot of depletion consultations happening in the White River right now that would necessarily justify the upfront work to do a PBO. I mean, we're pretty far along the path because we have this plan, but we're also at a point, well, now we got to get the funding commitments, we got to get the VA done, and then we got to get the service, you know, to figure out if they like the thing or not. Meanwhile, you know, maybe the augmentation conditions changed in a matter of years. So we had a really, I think, a thoughtful discussion. One was like, let's just pause and see what happens. The other is, well, we want to be really ready for when there is augmentation water. Maybe there's going to be a lot more water development and the consultation needs in the White River. So we want to be queued up and ready to go with our PBO. So, you know, the service isn't hanging up on future revisions. So, Al, how did I characterize, you know, 3-hour meeting?
I think you characterized it well. There's a lot you threw out on the table. It's tough to digest everything.
Yeah.
But I'd like to have questions come from the group, because you and I can talk anytime, we do. So I'd like to have the roundtable interact with you more than me, if I could, Callie.
I guess, David, thank you. Yeah, there's lots of information, especially this time.
That was a little, sure, we were talking last on the agenda.
So I guess how long, if you get it right now, what's the difference between continuing from where you're at right now and finalizing the PBO versus waiting 5 years and starting again? How much difference in time and cost is there gonna be if you delay it versus now?
That's a good question. And there was sort of, I think, let me phrase it like this, is there sort of an expiration date on the plan itself as it stands? There really isn't. You know, I think what we've done is characterize like the conditions of this status, there's low recommendation in that document. The management activity, I think are going to be like, if we haven't really implemented them in 3 to 5 years, there's still going to be things that we keep doing. So, and the only thing that we really can't do efficiently now is add water. So we really have to focus on sort of the non-flow related management. So I think it would be equally, the plan would be equally viable in 5 years. We would have those last couple of steps back out. We wouldn't have a cooperative agreement in the VA, but we'd have to do that now, or we'd have to do that in the future. And the only reservation that I have about doing this now, we're only looking at the phase 1 part. If we did it now for phase 1 and then, you know, augmentation water becomes available and it fuels a bunch of water depletion activities in the basin, we might exceed that cap, because once we get to 6,150 acre feet of water depletions, suddenly, oh, well now your phase 1 PBO is done. Now you need to go back and do this again for phase 2. So you would go back and describe more management activities. You would describe how I would think how augmentation water would help offset how that would be operating. Does that answer your question? I mean, there's not really a shelf life until you get out there. Probably it's 10 to 20 years. I really think if we haven't done anything with the plans in 10 to 15, 20 years, maybe some of the plans is a little stale at that point.
Yes, I guess the thing that comes to my mind is it's on everybody's mind right now.
Yeah.
If this stops
Yeah.
5 years from now, you've got a whole different staff. Or at least it's old and everybody's got to go, I'm sorry. That just is so,
That has happened. I mean, it came up first in 2002.
yeah, I know, it's been drugs on
One
fire.
of our riprap activities, like they went around the sub basin and say, who else needs a PBO or who else has sort of like a need for consultation? In 2002, oil and gas and energy development was happening. In the White River Basin, there were, I think, 27 consultations since '88 to 2021 in the White River Basin, and most of them, if not all of them, were energy development. In fact, BLM did an energy consultation. They did a programmatic for energy depletion specifically, up to 4,000 acre feet a year for the Colorado, planning area office. So that included, Garfield County, Peon Street, whatever is happening in water and energy development. But, when you put a few acre feet down a hole, you didn't want to go back like every one of those to Fish and Wildlife and get a consultation on depletions. So the BLM had some foresight, said, we're just going to do a programmatic just for energy, energy use consultation, for institutions. So that streamlined the use of water for fracking, absolutely.
Kent, I would love to hear what's on your
Yeah,
mind.
there's, David, in the recovery program's opinion, or your opinion, how important is the White River to success?
It's pretty important. There's still adult pockets, hydrogen that occupy that habitat seasonally, right up to the dam. The bottom 24 miles is, and again, I'll have more information next week when I come back with the sample group. But that is where a lot of suckers, razorback suckers, are flying. So I think when flow conditions like in 1977 or 2002 or 2012 or 2018 here coming by, the juveniles are small and they scatter into the side pools, and the adults are out of that system. They've evolved with travel, so they know when to get out, and it just becomes problematic when the juvenile is stuck in the last pool with the pool full of small bass. So we will continue to do bass fishing for sure. I'd love to again continue conversations with or without a PBO on 7, and how we can do 7 rates. Maybe that problem.
David, I don't think we're done having a conversation. I imagine whatever comes up from the August meeting and what you decide to do, I would imagine that the recovery program should come back to the roundtable. Because the roundtable within their IPP ranked a PBO as a very top priority for the White River. And there's multiple mechanisms that have to be done in order to finalize that, I understand. But it's something that this group has envisioned going back to the Jeff DeVere days and before, to where I sat down with him and several other entities at the Colorado River District Office with one mission. We're gonna get the White River a PBO and finalize. That was the mission, that was the goal, and that was the direction that everybody in that room moved towards, and that's where I believe we need to continue to move towards.
Yeah.
That's been my goal for the past 10 years that I've committed to this. And a lot of other people that have committed this as well. So I realize you coming in, within the past 18 months. But that was the original goal. Jeff DeVere sat there, he goes, Alden, I think we're on the right track. Let's go forward.
Yeah, and I understand that perspective again, we really want to make sure everybody understands what a PBO does do, what it doesn't do, and what the work required, and also what the program is currently doing. I mean, again, I described our recovery program as sort of this umbrella PBO. You get streamlined consultations relative to anybody else who doesn't have the program at work. So again, some of the thought, within our office is sort of like, well, we already already got a PBO. We're just not calling it a White River PBO because it's an Upper Colorado PBO. So instead of, 1 month, you're waiting 4 or 5 months for your consultation. But the same result applies. And again, conditions have changed, there's been waxing and waning in terms of water use in the White River Basin. And I totally get it, if you got a lot of water providers and water users like needing these consultations, that's where PBO really starts to make a lot of sense.
My perspective on this is we're in our process. If this in any way, shape, or form drags that out or delays it, we're gonna be wishing we'd have done something ahead of time.
So which process?
Getting a dam built.
Okay.
And if this not having the PBO in place delays that or gives us another setback, that's not where we want to go. We want to make sure this is streamlined, where when we get our permit, we're building. And if the PBO is essential for that, then we want it to move forward.
Yeah, the PBO really doesn't impact that project at all. This White River Management Plan, what I described as phase 1 PBO, they're very separate processes. And they, the Wolf Creek process and the NEPA and the consultations that are going and will go on for that project would be completely independent of this PBO. The PBO, you put the project in and all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of water providers who want access to augmentation water because suddenly, oh, there's augmentation, we need a water consultation because now we're completing 50, 100, 500 acre feet all up throughout the basin. That's where your PBO is going to be, where you have expanded irrigation now because you have, the ability to augment that.
Our opinion is getting a dam built fixes most of those problems and helps those fish a lot more than everything that's gone on.
Yeah, I could try to, that's not really my place to step into that one. Well, opine on that. We're just trying to figure out how to work with what we've got.
Okay.
I think that we're gonna.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks, David. That was a lot of information, working on this a lot too, and I think it definitely warrants a further discussion. I think between with the big roundtable, the planning team is going to come back in August and hopefully make a decision on whether to move forward with that PBO. Since it is part of the roundtable VIP, it may be up for further discussion from the roundtable just to determine where we stand on that and if it's warranted to, talk to that planning team and put forth the opinion of this group. I would say, I think that planning team right now is pretty on the fence. There's some users who really want to see that. There are others who want to see a delay. And so I think that decision we determine.
One of the things that we did offer, Al or whomever else on the planning team, I mentioned our committee process where we go to the biology committee or the water acquisition committee and also the management committee. Those are public meetings, they're open, you can attend and partake in that discussion if you want. And I can get the calendar for you guys if you want to turn it out. I think they're usually hybrid these days.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we are going to adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you.